I call the 2,436th meeting of the Milwaukee City Council to order. This meeting is being held in person at City Hall and by video conference. The public may participate in this meeting by coming to City Hall or joining the Zoom webinar. The meeting is being broadcast live on the city's YouTube channel and Comcast Cable Channel 30 within city limits. There will be opportunities for the public to speak during this meeting. If you would like to address council, you may come to City Hall or participate via Zoom. If you are interested in speaking, please let staff know by filling out a yellow comment card on the table in the room or emailing ocr@milwaukieoregon.gov for those on Zoom. When it is time to take public comments, staff will monitor the comment cards, email inbox, and Zoom participant list and chat. We will take comments in the order they are received and seen. Comments may be emailed to ocr@milwaukieoregon.gov. We ask that all Zoom participants who intend to speak label their Zoom username to show their first and last names for the record. Spanish translation services are available upon request. The public is asked to request translation and other meeting accessibility services at least 48 hours before the meeting. For more information, contact the city recorder at 503-786-7502. Servicios de traducción en español está disponible cuando sea solicitado. Se pide al público que solicite servicios de traducción y otros servicios de accesibilidad por lo menos 48 horas antes de la reunión. Para obtener más información, llama a el secretario de la ciudad a 503-786-7502. Translation services are also available in other languages. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The City of Milwaukee respectfully acknowledges that our community is located on the ancestral homeland of the Clackamas people. In 1855, the surviving members of the Clackamas signed the Willamette Valley Treaty, also known as the Kalapuya Etc. Treaty, with the federal government in good faith. We offer our respect and gratitude to the indigenous people of this land. And then on announcements, the Portland Book Festival continues this month in downtown Milwaukee. Check out several workshops and an author talk. And I want to give a shout out to Siona Balai of the Toolbox Gallery, because she really brought this potential idea to me and to others in town, and thanks to the library and to Spoken Word Books, which jumped on board. And so we had 7 events in Milwaukee, which is more than any other non-Portland town. And I hear that the Portland Book Festival people were pretty impressed. So there have been a few already, but there are 4 more before the end of the weekend. So Wednesday, November 5th at 4 p.m. at Spoken Word Books, hear Marjan Anvari lead a workshop on preserving stories. Also Wednesday, November 5th at 6 p.m. at the library, join author Wendy Wagner for a reading and discussion of her new novel, Girl in the Creek. And then Sunday has 2 book festival workshops, one featuring Edmo discussing Native American storytelling at 2 p.m. at the library, and a Make Trouble, Make Art workshop at 5 p.m. at Spoken Word Books. So all of these are free. So come out and participate in some of these great activities. You know, we have a kind of a slow season after Halloween, before December, or before Thanksgiving. So it's nice to have some new events in town. Friday, November 7th, is the deadline to participate in Metro's Community Choice Grants voting. Visit OregonMetro.gov, community choice by Friday. The city's this also out in some emails to people that are on parks, on email lists for parks issues. But yeah, please do get in your top 10 choices for what you'd like to see happen in our community in the park sphere. Friday, November 7th is also the deadline to share your thoughts about reducing speed limits on local streets. Visit engage.milwaukieoregon.gov/set-the-pace to share your thoughts on the idea of a 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. Saturday, this Saturday, from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m., the city is hosting a free event for Milwaukie residents to dispose of leaves. Bring a utility bill to show proof of residency. Leaves are accepted in paper bags, plastic bags, or loose. Non-perishable food items are also collected during each session, and that's at the Johnson Creek campus, 6101 Johnson Creek Boulevard. Next Tuesday is Veterans Day, about which we will be saying a little bit more in a few minutes, but the city offices and the library will be closed in observance of Veterans Day. Next Wednesday is the first of my office hours sessions. I'm taking a cue from what the city manager does, and I'm going to have a monthly session where people can stop by and raise whatever issues they want to raise. So next Wednesday from 10 to 11 a.m. Also on Wednesday, the Milwaukie Poetry Series Next Reading featuring Carlos Reyes. This reading will be at Ledding Library at 6 p.m. And finally, Friday, November 14th is the deadline to participate in the neighborhood survey. That's an opportunity to weigh in about how you'd like to see your neighborhood, what kind of activities or what kind of things you'd like to see your neighborhood undertake, or what questions you have about your own neighborhood association. And that website is engage.milwaukee.gov/NDA. And on Saturday, November 15th, the North Clackamas Watersheds Council is hosting a winter restoring wetlands workshop. Visit the Watershed Council's website, ncwatersheds.org, for more information. For more information about each of these events, please visit the city's homepage at milwaukieoregon.gov or call 503-786-7555. I will note, just as on behalf of the Milwaukie Parks Foundation, second Saturday, which is this Saturday, there's always a work party in Minthorn Springs, and it looks like we'll get a break in the rain, so that'll be nice. 9:30 a.m. to noon at Minthorn Springs. Okay, here's the haiku. Willamette whispers, unheard upon silent shores, the stream meanders. Submitted by a resident named Andy Bachman. I appreciate it. I got a lot of haiku submissions, and I'm in good shape until February or March. So, yeah. And actually, Jennifer and Hamid get the credit for generating all the submissions. So, I appreciate their help. All right. So, our only proclamation today is Veterans Day, and it's going to be presented by Councilors Massey and Khosrowshahi. I believe Councilor Massey is going to start.
I am. Thank you, Mayor. This is the last public meeting before Veterans Day, which is a week from today. It's on November 11th. The origins of Veterans Day goes back to World War I, and it was originally called Armistice Day, and it was observed on the first anniversary of the end of World War I. And that armistice went into effect at 11 a.m. on the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918. And it was known as Armistice Day up until, I believe, the early 50s when President Eisenhower changed it to Veterans Day to honor not only the World War I veterans, but all veterans who were actively serving or who had served before. There are about 16 million veterans in the United States, which represents roughly 6% of the population. And, the thank you for your service is always appreciated and that kind of thing. But I would ask you to go a little bit further and just ask a veteran that you know or come upon, tell me about your service, because I think that you'll find some interesting things. And they're more likely to tell you about the camaraderie that they had in the service, the friendships that they developed in the service, because those friendships I can tell you now, and I think Adam can too, they last a lifetime. They may be the most important friendships you have in your life. And I have one of those friendships with a shipmate of mine, an Irishman from Massachusetts named Tom. And our wives, Cindy and Gail, like to laugh and say, these guys text each other more often than teenagers in middle school. And I said, oh, that's not true. And I counted them today. And before 8:30 this morning, there were 29 text messages sent between he and I. So those are important friendships. You build a lot of confidence and trust in those people because sometimes your life depended on it, okay? And so I would just say, ask a veteran about their service and you might hear some interesting stories. Adam?
Thanks, Robert. I appreciate that. Yeah, I mean, just to touch a little bit more on what Robert said, you know, this is a very special day, not just for the vets, but for everybody, for people who call this country home, right? Regardless of if you feel like you belong here or somebody thinks that you don't. This country was fought for by these men and women in uniform, brave individuals, courageous individuals, people who gave up everything they had back home to serve their country. So it's incredibly, it's not just symbolic. It has a deeper meaning than that. And, you know, I as a vet, I want to, as much as Robert said, you know, talk about this, I want to thank you for blazing the path before us, before my generation. I think that's kind of how it goes. We all thank the generation before us because if they didn't lay the path, then we probably wouldn't be here today. So I want to thank all the veterans out there and a lot of veterans that are still struggling with their wounds of war. Some that have wounds that didn't even experience war. Because the military life is not easy, not one that's taken lightly either. So I just want to extend my gratitude for all those veterans, everyone who has served. And, you know, speaking on the friendships, he's not wrong. We have a group chat, actually. There's about 10 of us in that group chat, and anytime we get together, there's about 30 of us that fly in. And I'll tell you, it's like we never missed a beat. And when if you've ever had a friend that would say that you would die for, I know a few that have actually done that for me. So I'm lucky in that sense. I'm blessed to have known such brave individuals. With that said, I would also like to extend a happy birthday to the United States Marine Corps. Hurrah, that's right. Whose birthday is actually November 10th, right before Veterans Day, because we had to one-up everyone. And for those of you who don't know, the Marine Corps was actually born in a tavern. So there's a lot of alcohol problems there. And as a Marine myself, I'm honored to wear that Eagle Globe and Anchor. And some people know us as Jarheads. Some people know us as Leathernecks. Some people know us as the greatest fighting force in the world. But one thing that everybody can agree with is that we do have the best damn uniforms in the service. It's dress blues. So I do want to wish a happy birthday to the greatest fighting force the world has ever known, to America's 911 force. I am honored and privileged to be a part of them. And again, happy Veterans Day, and stay strong to all those veterans out there. Thank you.
Thank you both. We had been going to have a guest, Tina Kennedy, but she wasn't able to make it. Do we have anybody here who's making remarks? Oh, reading okay. But there's nobody here in the crowd that's making further remarks. Okay. So who wants to read the proclamation? Okay.
Whereas the United States, it's hard to read. Whereas the United States, oh, Scott.
He's trying to blow it up for you.
Okay, I got it now. No more movement. I tried. Yeah. They'd never get to the battle without the Navy.
It's true. Thanks for the rides.
Whereas the United States first proclaimed November 11th, 1919 as Armistice Day to mark the end of World War I, the war to end all wars and to solemnly reflect on the horrific consequences of all wars. And whereas since 1919, the 11th day of the 11th month has come to be a time to recognize the contributions made by the millions of men and women who answered our nation's call to arms in the pursuit of world peace. And whereas Veterans Day brings communities together to honor military veterans and their legacy of selfless service and sacrifice, and to remember the millions of civilians and military personnel who have died or have been injured by war. And whereas the United States Department of Defense recognizes that the risk of future wars will be greatly increased by climate chaos and the resulting forced migration due to devastating starvation, inundation, fires, flooding, and drought. And we should do everything necessary to decrease these effects. And whereas the city of Milwaukie has been proud to partner with the American Legion Post 180, the Susan Lee Barlow chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, and the Fort Kennedy to recognize and support veterans in this community. And whereas the city of Milwaukie recognizes the sacrifices made by those who served our country so that all may pursue life, liberty, and happiness. Mayor?
Now therefore, I, Lisa Beatty, Mayor of the City of Milwaukie, a municipal corporation in the County of Clackamas in the state of Oregon, do hereby proclaim November 11th, 2025 to be Veterans Day in the City of Milwaukie. So thank you. And with that, we move on to community comments. This is the part of the agenda during which council will hear community comments on city business that is not already on the agenda. Before we begin, is there any follow-up from the October 21st comments, Ms. Sager?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few quick follow-ups. At that meeting, we had Dave Ashenbrenner come and provide comments and testimony on a range of things, including some asks about where vehicles can park on Home Avenue. And I'm going to be having our engineering and code compliance team reach out to Dave to provide that information. We also had Elvis Clark testify about safety concerns on behalf of the Ardenwald Johnson Creek Neighborhood Association around 37th and Harrison. And we will have engineering staff attending the NDA meeting on November 24th to discuss that more. We also then received some correspondence. The only general piece of correspondence we received in writing was about speed limits on Lake Road. And so thank you in your announcements, Mayor, you referenced the Engage Milwaukie survey out right now about reducing speeds on collectors and neighborhood routes. Lake Road is not a collector or a neighborhood route, it's an arterial, but I still encourage folks to take that survey by November 7th. And then on November 18th, our staff will be here discussing the proposal to lower speeds. I will ask them as well in that presentation to talk about speeds on that section of Lake, even though it's an arterial. And I believe that commenter also asked about possibilities to get more of our slow the flock down signs, which I love. So I'll be working on a plan for that. We did them specifically kind of for the 29th Greenway, but I think the message applies all over the place. So we'll be looking to do another run of that and make those available to the public.
Great. I know, yeah, I've had requests for those too, so that's great to hear. Okay, I do not have any yellow cards. No one's here to testify other than about something on the agenda. Okay, Mr. Stoffer, anybody on Zoom?
We do have a Zoom audience tonight, but I see no hands raised, and I don't have any yellow cards either.
Okay, so I'm not going to read the rest of that script then, and we will move on to the consent agenda. Tonight's consent agenda includes minutes of the City Council September 16th, 2025 work session, September 16th, 2025 regular session, October 7th, 2025 work session, and October 7th, 2025 regular session, and a resolution authorizing a financing application with the Oregon Health Authority for the construction of a raw water pipeline and treatment site preparation. Does any council member wish to remove a consent agenda item? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say no. None heard. The consent agenda passes unanimously. And we move on to first of three sort of park and nature related business items tonight. And this one is about the ongoing, as a continuation of discussion we started a couple weeks ago about negotiations with the North Clackamas Parks and Recreation District Board about trying to get Milwaukie Bay Park built. And I will let the city manager give us an update.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm just gonna give Scott a second to pull up a very short slide deck. It should be saved in the folder. If you don't see it, Scott, let me know. Says it's in city recorder. City recorder 11:04 work session, regular session finals. Yeah. Sorry, now I have it open, so it's probably gonna. We'll get there. We'll get there. Okay. All right, so we, spoiler alert, I don't want to do a large buildup and then kind of with a letdown at the end. We received the latest update from our partners at the county at 4:51 p.m. So we're not going to get a big substantive update tonight. But what I did want to recap for council and for anyone watching and following along on this important topic is sort of what has happened since our meeting 2 weeks ago. And then a very brief update of where we are now and where I think the next steps are. So at our last meeting, we discussed the latest verbal terms that have been relayed to staff regarding our ongoing 10 months of negotiations to restart Milwaukie Bay Park. The direction from council was to send a letter to the NCPRD Board of Directors, and that letter was delivered on October 23rd. The letter included, a lot of points, including a timeline of how we got to this point, but really the ending note was articulation of terms that the city is asking for in an agreement to advance Milwaukie Bay Park. And those terms were, one, that Milwaukie would take over project management of the park project, that NCPRD would transfer designs and contracts to the city, that NCPRD would contribute financially. These values came from a previous letter transmitted from the board to our negotiating team, and they included 3.1 million of Zone 1 SDCs. These are SDCs paid by Milwaukie Development into the district, and 2.5 million of Metro local share dollars that had been previously budgeted by NCPRD for the project. And then we also, as you'll recall, had been at the county's ask, negotiating a addendum to the cooperative IGA. They call it the master IGA at the same time. And it was it was the council's wish that those be adopted at the same time, that negotiated addendum and a park agreement. So we sent that letter. We asked for a written response by November 1st. We did not receive a written response by November 1st. The board did meet publicly on October 29th as the NCPRD board. At that meeting, a few things happened. They adopted a new system plan for the district. They also approved a contract to look at revenue strategies for the district. They received a financial update about the financial health of the district and authorized a consultant to support with looking at options for improving that financial outlook. There was also a variety of community testimony, including 5 Milwaukie residents that testified, asking for a response and an agreement on Milwaukie Bay Park. So my next slide is going to be a little bit of kind of what happened today and where we go next, but I just wanted to pause there and ask if other counselors wanted to share any updates that have happened between that meeting and today related to this topic.
Well, so I don't know whether I should do this now or after your other slide, but I mean, basically, we're not going to talk substance about the agreements because we haven't had a chance to read them. But I did want to talk a little bit about process, and I wanted to clarify and actually apologize for some things I probably some meetings I probably should not have held. So I want to give a little bit of a timeline. So we had 3 meetings at the beginning of the year, and the third one was on April 29th, and that was the point where we agreed to revisit the comprehensive IGA, or the, whatever we're calling it, cooperative IGA. That was not what we went into the 2-on-2 negotiations to do, but we realized that we were not going to move forward if we didn't, so we agreed to do that, and we sort of took a pause in the 2-on-2 meetings while staff worked, on that cooperative IGA. So there was a pause from basically all of May, all of June into July. During that time period, I met with 2 commissioners other than the commissioners that were on the negotiating team. And I want to sort of briefly describe these meetings. The first one was I was invited to Commissioner Schrader's home for a meal in her backyard with a mutual friend that we have. It was a wide-ranging conversation, but we definitely, among other things, talked about Milwaukie Bay Park. And that was in June. And on July 1st, Councilor Massey and I met with the newest commissioner, Commissioner Helm. And that was really trying to introduce her to Milwaukie. We brought her to we had coffee at Keeper, and we brought her through City Hall, and we walked down to Milwaukie Bay Park. We did definitely talk about Milwaukie Bay Park. Was it improper to talk about it while we were in a pause in the 2-on-2 negotiations? I don't know. I don't know if it was actually improper, but in retrospect, I wish I hadn't. I wish I had sort of just said, we're in negotiations and we shouldn't be having these conversations. There are 2 more recent conversations with Commissioner Helm that I definitely regret having. So since the point where we got back into negotiation at the end of July, and that, that meeting tempo since then, or conversation tempo since then, has been fairly rapid. Commissioner Helm reached out to me twice, asking to talk. One time we met in Milwaukie Bay Park, and another time last week we spoke on the phone. Those 2 conversations I really do feel I should not have had, and they've led to some mischaracterizations. They've, and I just, I want to apologize to all of you as having been elected to do the 2-on-2 negotiations, that I should not have had those conversations outside the 2-on-2 negotiations. And I have something else I want to say addressing the some of the comments that were made at the Board of Directors meeting last week, but that's sort of another issue. So I don't know if anybody else wanted to talk about conversations they've had with the county commissioners.
Well, I'll chime in. I went to the Clackamas Cities Association dinner in Gladstone. Thank you, Gladstone, for representing. It was lovely. And I had conversations with a couple of the county commissioners, which I did not initiate. But so I spoke with Commissioner Savas. Commissioner Helm was present, as was Chair Roberts, and I reminded them that they would represent a majority of their board, and so Commissioner Helm excused herself. So I spoke at length with Commissioner Savas and Chair Roberts. I think that the conversation that you referenced, Mayor, and thank you for bringing it to our attention, I think it spawned some confusion or miscommunication amongst the county board, because the way that it was characterized to me was that, that you had advocated for something that the council had not, set as, you know, the goal parameters for the negotiation. And so, I just made it very clear to them, multiple times that any conversation that happens outside of the negotiation that we have directed, our representatives to have is just that. It's a conversation to the side of a negotiation, whether it's paused or not, whether it's appropriate or not. I'll, you know, like, we're all big kids, we can figure it out. So, but the, what I, what I picked up from the conversation was that they felt very strongly that that conversation that you had had with Commissioner Helm had, you know, sent a very different message than what the negotiations, you know, were, the direction that they were going. And I think it's actually a moot point. I think that, we as council appointed 2 representatives to have negotiated discussion around a positive outcome for Milwaukie Bay Park. And that's what we were expecting. Whether you have a conversation off to the side or not, it doesn't have the power to derail those negotiations. It doesn't have the power to divert our goal that we've all determined, you know, was the North Star in those negotiations. So I made that very clear. I also, I suggested that someone from the county come to this meeting, because we have discussions in this format because we're not able to have executive session on this topic. The city council advice is that that is not a legal use of executive, session for us. The county has other legal advice from the county council, and I'm not even gonna spend time debating that. You know, y'all are lawyers, you can debate it. But they are able to have more discussion as a body through their use of executive session than we are. And certainly, so it's a lot more public to be having this conversation. So I think that, you know, the more that we can bring to light in the discussions that we have here, the better. And that's why I had invited Commissioner Savas and Chair Roberts to come to this meeting and have a discussion with us and get the negotiations back on track. I thought that we actually made progress in the conversation that I had with them. We shook on it, and they're not here. And I haven't heard anything to the contrary, you know, I haven't heard anything otherwise. So that's, it's disappointing, because I thought this would be an opportunity for us all to just recenter around, around a North Star goal, which is to make sure that all of the residents of North Clackamas, whether they be Milwaukie residents or unincorporated residents, or, you know, or even somebody from outside of North Clackamas who wants that park developed, you know, to see something happen in their lifetime. Anyway, so I'll divulge that I had those conversations. That's the meat of it. I also received a phone call from, Commissioner West and Commissioner Schrader. I reiterated essentially the same. So, I've been pretty, consistent in my communication with them. I have also advised them that any of the conversations that they might be looping back and forth, if they're not having them in executive session, is, you know, is their responsibility to hold, because this is where we have our conversations. That's all.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I do, yeah, I mean, it's an odd situation because they do everything in executive session and we don't talk to you other than here in public. And that does bring me to a comment that Commissioner Savas made at the DAC meeting last week, where he implied that we breached some confidentiality. There was never any agreement of confidentiality in those negotiations. I think everyone involved would agree to that. We never made any agreement about confidentiality. Commissioner Savas, and maybe maybe their whole team, I don't know, have had this interpretation that if they route all their communications through their attorney, it's somehow privileged, and that somehow confers some kind of confidentiality on it. That's not the way attorney-client privilege works. Once they speak to someone that is not part of their attorney-client, dome, umbrella, there's no more attorney-client privilege. So when they are talking with us in these negotiation sessions, there is no confidentiality. We made no assurances of that, and I think Commissioner's office was unreasonable to expect that. So I just wanted to clarify that because I've heard a few comments about, us breaching their confidentiality. It looks like the council president would like to speak.
My fingers hovering over the button. I just wanted to jump on and say that across various meetings or I guess various ribbon cuttings and events across the city, I've had chances to talk with our different county commissioners who, as representatives of us here in Milwaukie, talk about all things Milwaukie, and inevitably parks is something that they want to bring up. I really will say that Mayor, you and Councilor Massey have been acting on behalf of the entire body, speaking for the body at these negotiations. And I think that is the forum for these discussions to really substantively happen. And I have a lot of faith in what you all brought forward at the negotiating table. My top priority here, as we spelled out in our letter back to the county, is to get this park built. And if there are any county commissioners or staff members watching, I want that to be clear. We are incredibly ready to continue to negotiate. We will listen to whatever counter proposal you have. Give us something back. But I really want to continue to make forward progress here. I appreciate the work that happened at those 2-on-2 meetings, and I do not want to end a conversation.
I'm sorry, a lot of this is new, because I thought we had dedicated 2 individuals to have those meetings, and that any other meetings that we would be privy to. I'm a little disappointed right now, because it sounds like everybody's had a conversation with commissioners about parks except for me. Am I the only one that followed the rule? Am I the only one that stayed true to the agreement that the 5 of us made on this desk? So that's a little disappointing. Because why am I on the outside? Now, your conversation is different because that was prompted by the conversation the mayor had. So that prompted them to come and basically corner you. So I get that, but I thought we had an agreement and we had a trusting decision-making that we had put forth. Now it's like everybody's out having their own conversations. So I had a 2-hour coffee meeting with Commissioner Salas and didn't mention parks one time. Could have. I have a better relationship with him than I'm sure the 4 of you do. But I'm not in those meetings. I didn't complain about it either. Now I'm hearing that everybody's just out wheeling and dealing. Now look at where we're at. I mean, Mayor, that conversation is what prompted where we're at now, clearly. And the fact that that wasn't brought up to us till now, until after we had a meeting. I mean, we sat here in the last meeting pointing the finger at the county. And little did we know that you had a meeting that none of us knew about that resulted in this situation. I mean, that's
Well,
we should know that.
I think, well, I didn't. I mean,
But
I
you
did.
had a meeting-
I had a
talked about
conversation
it.
with
We didn't know until now.
Commissioner Helm, and I never would have construed that conversation as being about departure from the district. She raised it, and I said, as we said in all of our meetings, we are not looking, we have had no vote. We are not looking to leave the district. We are focused on Milwaukie Bay Park. I mean, I stuck to that message through the thing. So I was very surprised when that became this idea of withdrawal that we saw last time. But I do take responsibility for that conversation having been the trigger for that. And I will say, she apologized for misunderstanding or misrepresenting what I said. So I think she recognized maybe that there was some.
And so I'm sorry, real quick, Council President. My problem is I just don't seem to think that we're understanding what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with egos. We're not dealing with what's in the best interest of the people we represent. We're dealing with egos. Anything, even what was just said about Commissioner Savas right now, do you not think he's going to look at that and use that as another reason to not negotiate with us? This is the problem. This is the problem. There's ego involved. There's bad blood. It has nothing to do with what's in the best interest of the district. It has everything to do with what's in the best interest of the individual who's trying to get this done. Like, we're all on here together trying to get this done for people, but there are egos involved here that are beyond, how do I want to say, that are beyond common sense and logic to do the right thing. Because it's not about doing the right thing. It's about one-upping somebody, one-upping the other, and getting this is why we're in the same position that we're in. And this is why I've asked to always be a part of that discussion. Because I'm not looking at it. I don't have a 15-year history with these people that are up there deliberately trying to block us from creating this part. Like, we know what this is about. There's no reason to sugarcoat it. But it doesn't help when there's these side conversations happening throughout our council. It hurts to trust. How am I supposed to trust? If I'm the only one keeping my mouth shut, how am I supposed to trust now when knowing that nobody else is? Like, how am I supposed to have confidence that the two that we've selected to negotiate are now going to negotiate and it's not going to shoot ourselves in the foot? It's frustrating. I mean, I trusted this council.
Well, I hear your frustration. Yeah, all I can say is I wish I had not responded to the last two overtures from Commissioner Helm. But anyway, Council President had his.
And I might say, Councilor Roddy, these meetings that I think all of us have described are not any meetings with the intent to talk about parks. I think it's just, yeah.
Well, I had a 2-hour coffee meeting with the council president.
Yeah.
With Paul Savas, the main blockade, right? And not one time did anything about Milwaukie Bay Park come up.
Yeah.
Not one time. And I put that on my life and my family's life. You can even ask Mr. Savas himself. Not one time. You don't think I wanted to? You don't think I wanted to just be like, hey man, where are we at? But I stuck to the word that this council agreed on. And I didn't.
Yeah.
And the fact that this is a meeting that happened months ago, and we're hearing about it now, after the fact that they had sent us this, and we had pointed fingers, I mean, it's just
No,
the lack of transparency.
just to clarify the timeline, my 2 solo conversations with Commissioner Helm have been within the last month. They weren't months ago.
Where was the one that you talked about in June or July?
That
Which
was,
That
yeah,
was
that
another side
was,
meeting too, right?
well, that was a welcome to Milwaukie meeting that Councilor Massey and I did together. It was a walk around downtown Milwaukie for the new commissioner.
Why are we hearing about it now, though? If Parks was talked about, how come we didn't hear about it?
Yeah.
That's my problem.
I appreciate that frustration, and I guess just closing my thought, I don't think that any of us are initiating kind of side conversations that are substantive. I think that when this has been a conversation that others have raised with the mayor, Rebecca, or I know I've at least said in the conversations that happened after the letter, which are the entirety of my conversations, I've said we wrote a letter. I described the content of the letter, and that's about it. But I will say I hear the frustration. I appreciate that there. I think
Months have gone by since those, like the fact that we're hearing it now, we acted like I sat here in this chair in the last meeting, really upset because I was like, why is the county doing this to us? But little did I know that we're also part of the problem. We're also part of the problem. So it makes me even more frustrated because it's like, okay, how do we solve this problem? Because we're both part of it, and it's really frustrating. I'm sorry.
Well, I was gonna say, I think Emma has some ideas about the next steps, so that might be somewhat of an answer to you, but I want to give Councilor Stavisor a chance to.
I'm going to be very clear that as independently elected individuals, we have a responsibility to represent a lot of different policy areas that affect Milwaukie. And when we as a council make a decision to go into a negotiation or a mediation, and we have representatives that are appointed to be a part of that, then you are correct. It is not appropriate to have any leading conversation or lobbying conversation outside of that process. But we all know that we see different boards and different city councils and individuals that we've also built relationships with. And you're talking about seeing, like, we all have those connections, and it makes it very impossible to ignore that person. Now, let me say this next piece before you respond. I think it is completely respectful and appropriate to reiterate the points that have been made on this dais. To say that we have a team that's been appointed to do negotiations. Our council is in favor of doing the negotiation. And anything that derails that process, especially something that happens outside of those negotiation sessions, shouldn't be considered as part of the council action. It's an action of an individual. It's a conversation of one of the five. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I actually think that when we all have an opportunity to reiterate what keeps us on this path, this North Star towards Milwaukie Bay Park, or any policy area, when we have a chance to reiterate those points, that does show that we have trust on this council. It does show that I trust the people who have been appointed to our negotiation team to do the negotiating. And that stays the same. I personally still trust our two representatives to get in that room and work out the best possible solution for Milwaukie Bay Park. And I trust that the county is probably grappling with some of these conversations right now. I hope that they also get back in that room and have a discussion about how we benefit all of our residents. But I don't think that when we're approached and the topic is brought up and we know what the bumpers are for that conversation, I think it's okay to respond and say, hey, listen, this is what we've talked about publicly. This is the process we're following, and I want to support that process. So get back to work.
And I can appreciate that. Number one, if you're dealing with rational people, which we're not, right? Whatever anybody on this council says about parks, we know that certain commissioners will use that as a reason to not deliver the park. We know this. We know our audience. We're not dealing with people who are logically rational when it comes to this subject. They're looking for any reason to tell us no. So to give them more ammunition it makes no sense, number one. Number two, having those conversations is fine. That's great. Having the team, because we trust that team. But hearing about it a month later is inappropriate. Hearing about it a month later is inappropriate. About two meetings is inappropriate if we're a team. Right? So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not so upset with the mayor, you having that conversation because you're part of that team. But when I hear about it a month later, it's like, well, where's the trust? Like, why didn't you tell us earlier? And then when I hear council president also having conversations, I'm like, okay, well, what is he having conversations about? And again, Councilor Stavanger, it wasn't your fault. That was prompted, you were jumped, basically. But that was prompted more by what happened from here.
But I also stayed in the discussion, not lobbying for anything, not have, if anything, I felt like it would have been really helpful to have the disclosure ahead of time because it was embarrassing to go to the dinner alone, I might add. No, I'm just joking. It was hard to go into that space and not know the content of the discussion that you had outside of the negotiation team. And then hear, they were alleging, the content of that discussion. I don't want to pass judgment on that. All I want to say is that anything that happens outside of the negotiation team on this topic really shouldn't sway the direction that we are going
But it
We
it's
hope
gonna
to
stay
go.
theirs. That's the problem. Like, I just look at it like this. We know who we're dealing with. We need to play chess, not checkers, right? If someone was to come to me, I'd say, look, we have two representatives that have been duly elected by this council. You can talk to them about your parks issue. That's it. That should be it. Because if we start going off in different tangents, this is how they're splintering us. This is how they're dividing and conquering. This is their plan, is to sow this discourse, to say, oh, well, the mayor told us this. And then Will's like, well, that's the point. But if we stuck to it and said, look, I'm not dealing with parks. That's the mayor and that's Councilor Robert Mency. You got a question with parks, please handle it with them. Until I'm told otherwise, that's it. We can be disciplined enough to do that. Then we can show a united front and have a little bit more, in my opinion, a little bit more behind us than Commissioner West going to you, and you, and you, and me. I mean, that's
Well,
what they're
so
doing.
I do think they're trying to splinter us. But I do think, we do have the response now. And so, we do have something to look at and to come back to you with. And I think that's the proposal that Emma wanted to talk about.
Thanks, Mayor. And I just want to add, my only bit of commentary on this, having sat in every 2-on-2 session, is I want to reassure the rest of council and reassure the public that the conversations at the table have been entirely consistent with direction from council. There has been no deviation from that direction. The letter that you sent on October 23rd reiterating the city's position is a consistent message. And so I've observed all of those and can vouch for that. So we do have a response. We did not get a response in writing by November 1st as requested, but we did receive draft IGAs. And despite the miscommunication and brief detour from what we were originally talking about to talk about other topics, we are back looking at 2 IGAs, an addendum to the cooperative IGA and an IGA related to Milwaukie Bay Park. So those were received by the city attorney at 4:51. Because of that late hour, we need some time to review the drafts, and I don't want to risk any misstatement of details or facts tonight. So we're not sharing that here. That said, this I know is a matter of urgency and importance to our council, and we know that it's taken a long time to even get to this point. And our next meeting on November 18th is a very full meeting. Actually, the next 2 meetings are very full. So given that, the negotiation team and I met very briefly prior to this and wanted to propose scheduling a special session for next week with council where we can review and discuss the terms that have been put in those draft IGAs. Again, we were hoping to do it tonight. We didn't get them in time to process that. Next week would typically be a study session week, but Veterans Day is on Tuesday, so we don't have a meeting on Tuesday. But I think our ask was to see if there is availability among council to schedule and notice a special session for Wednesday through Friday of next week to meet. I will note, I think the DAC meets on the 12th. So I'm not sure if there's.
Oh, yeah, the DAC meets from 5:30 to 7. So I could meet later that day. But yeah, it would have to be later.
So I guess we're asking.
Or
Or I guess earlier.
or earlier, yeah.
So could folks look at their availability, council folks, and tell us Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, availability for holding and noticing a special session to discuss the agreements that have been received. I'm available Thursday and Friday evenings.
Me too.
Thursday and Friday were fine for me.
We can maybe proceed them with 5 PM on Thursday. We'll get that noticed. And there'll be a special session, so it'll be noticed publicly and publicly available.
That's Thursday, November 13th
Thursday, November 13th.
at 5 p.m.
Okay. Well, we'll discuss this more then.
Well, thank you, everyone. So we have a few more things on our agenda. The next is a discussion about public-private green space partnerships. And I'll invite forward our Public Works Director, Peter Passarelli, and our Parks and Green Space Development Manager, Adam Moore.
Good evening, Mayor Beatty and Council, and Peter Passarelli, the Public Works Director. With me tonight, and who's going to be providing the presentation is Adam Moore, our Parks and Green Space Development Manager. One of the items that we identified in our Parks and Green Space Goal strategies was looking at public and private partnerships and how they relate to our green space and how it might relate to how we manage green space in the future. Adams has broached the subject with our Parks and Recreation Board, had an initial discussion last month. And this is sort of the initial discussion that we want to have with you about it and get some feedback and potential future guidance to move forward with this. So there we go. So Adam.
Right on time. Good evening, Council. Nice to be here again with you. This is just a very general overview, but we spent time as staff doing some research into public-private partnerships and how they may be utilized in our parks and green space. And as a staff, we presented 4 different types to the Parks and Rec Board for some feedback. Those 4 types are program-based partnerships, capital improvements, operation and maintenance, and revenue generating. And these are all for different types of partnerships that we could potentially see the city getting involved with, or perhaps the city is already involved with them in some ways, and we need to look at formalizing them. When we're talking about programming partnerships, we work to identify basic activities that can be done in our parks or in our green space. These could be recreational, cultural, educational, community programming in the form of outdoor fitness. This could be art classes, environmental education offered by a third party on public property in agreement with the city or NCPRD. Capital improvements, right? Those are infrastructure improvements that are made in public parks or green spaces that are provided by third parties to the city or the park district for the public good. This could be not just fundraising or developmental services, but this is also financial agreements. Perhaps there's some ways that we can, in parks, utilize different bond rates or interest rates. You see these not necessarily as much in smaller neighborhood parks, but in larger park projects or in different large infrastructure projects. Bridges, I think, are a big fan of public-private partnerships and utilizing different bond rates and interest rates, leading to public amenities. O&M partnerships are operational maintenance partnerships. Those could be assistance provided by volunteers or third parties in our green spaces and parks that just improve the physical experience for our park users. These can be our friends of groups. These could be commercial businesses. These could be adopt-a-park groups providing services in exchange for their benefit or just out of their goodwill. Well, I think that one thing that we identified in having this conversation as a staff and with the Parks and Rec Board is that these definitions are very loose when we're talking about partnerships. And I'll get to this further into the discussion, but the Parks and Rec Board in particular wanted to see a process that we set up that allowed for entrepreneurship and allowed for creativity and flexibility. So for example, a commercial entity could gather their employees, they could sponsor an event, they can have branded T-shirts, and they are using the partnership with the city in our public space to indirectly advertise their business or maybe directly advertise their business by going out and saying, we have adopted this lovely green space and we want to make sure that you know that our company and our employees are here to provide those services to you, the city of Milwaukie, and to your public. So that might be an opportunity for that. That's a little bit of a stretch, but what we've seen in our research is that these partnerships, each one of them is a little bit unique. And then revenue generating partnerships. So the use of public space for commercial activities provided to the public to enhance the experience in that public space. This could be in the form of concessions, equipment rentals, right? We talk a lot about kayak rentals. The use of underutilized space. So perhaps we have public facilities that aren't getting utilized as much as we would like to. You see this being common in community centers or senior centers, where there is some slow time in that public space that might be leased out by a third party for their benefit and as a way to offer a variety of new programming. Or this could be the use of special amenities operated by third parties, right? So perhaps they're, one of the suggestions we've heard in some of our community engagement in the past is, why don't you allow for a private organization to build pickleball courts on your land and start a pickleball club? And the only people who get to use it are people who pay for the pickleball league. This is, again, just something hypothetically that I'm bringing up that we've heard about in the past, and one way in which that partnership could come to fruition. So with those kind of just four basic types in mind, we had a conversation with the Parks and Rec Board at the October meeting, and we asked them a few questions. And the first one was, what's the difference between a partnership and an agreement? And who needs to benefit to make it a partnership? And the example that we gave at the meeting was, across the street, we have a privately owned parking lot that we, the city, lease out and we make available for the public to use and for staff to use. That's an agreement that we have. And the question that we posed to the Parks and Rec Board is that a business arrangement or is that a partnership? And through our lengthy discussion at the board meeting, Park felt that in addition to a situation where there are really three parties involved, not just the city and the partner, but also the general public, and the impacts on those three entities need to be considered, but we also need to be implementing shared goals, right? It's not just quid pro quo, even if you're considering three different entities, but are we advancing our goals for parks and green space when we're entering into these partnerships? And then again, above all else, make sure that we're protecting our sensitive natural resources. The second question we asked is, how do we balance public benefit with commercial or fee-based use, right? So if we're going to find a way to open up some of our publicly held assets for private companies to use, the Parks and Rec Board felt that we needed to beforehand develop a strategy and a plan that details the public's goals through community engagement and identifies the environmental limitations in our parks and green spaces first, and then allow commercial or fee-based entities to submit proposals. Then we followed up with, what are the limitations that we should be considering when we offer these partnerships out to people? And the Parks and Rec Board felt that the impacts on available general recreation space, in addition to those sensitive natural resources, should be avoided. And what I mean by that is, we as a city have a very small amount of acreage per 1,000 people. It's somewhere around 2 acres. The recommendation from the Trust for Public Lands is 6 acres per 1,000 people. The national recommendation from the Recreation and Parks Association is 10. And so we felt as though we don't just need to think about our sensitive spaces, our wetlands, our natural areas, our natural resource protected areas, but we also need to make sure that we're not losing completely some of that space for unstructured play. That all being said, the Parks and Rec Board felt that we needed to allow for creativity, flexibility, and place-based opportunities to be sought. The type of partnership might be important when we're considering these locations. And most importantly, evaluating the proposals that we receive on a case-by-case basis would be really important. Basically, the Parks and Rec Board said, hey, we don't know what we don't know. We aren't entrepreneurs as the city. And there could be real benefit to the general public if we allow people to submit proposals to us. And so, well, that might look like, right? And so the question was, how do we enter into these partnerships or offer fee-based use of our public assets equitably, fairly, and transparently? And the Parks and Rec Board thought that a transparent solicitation process after that strategy and plan had been adopted in a publicly vetted manner where public involvement is available for the selection of those partnerships and the development of those partnerships would be really, really important. So what does that mean? It means we're doing community engagement, we're working on our strategy, we're adopting our plan, we're doing some community engagement, and we're sitting out a request for proposals for partnerships in these spaces, and we're making sure that the public is involved. That could be a tree board member or a Parks and Rec Board member or equity steering committee member on the evaluation team to look at the proposals that we received.
Maybe you're gonna clarify this, but are you talking about a process where we just said, bring us your proposals for any of our parks? Or are you saying we would identify parks where we were gonna entertain proposals?
Well, I think what the Parks and Rec Board has said is that we do need some structure. And that structure can come in the form of policies that offer that framework and a parks or green space management plan that lays out what those public goals are that we want to meet in these partnerships, and then what the different parameters are. And then put out that RFP, that request for proposals, and so see what comes back. And then evaluate them as a public body with the public involved. How we do that would be spelled out in that strategy and that plan. So it's not a complete free-for-all, but it's setting up a framework and a plan that then opens it up for proposals that we review and decide yes to this, no to this, maybe to that, and here's how we need to tweak it based on its location or what is being offered.
If I can add, and I'm going to get into this on some of the recommendations, but when we look at our larger parks and green space goal, one of the other strategies that we've identified is developing a green space management plan, right? And that's something that we're in the very early process of developing the scope of work for going out and doing an RFQ and hiring a consultant to help us go through that process, that engagement process with the community to develop that green space management plan. Oh, sorry about that. So that's an important part of it, that green space management plan. As we go through that, I think one of the deliverables out of that is this framework that we're talking about.
I guess I can be really brief. I'm confused. Are you saying a one-time RFP for, or like, I guess what is Barb describing here with RFP, or the process by which businesses would reach out?
I think what Harb's biggest concern and why the RFP process was brought up was that they wanted to make sure that everybody had this opportunity, that we weren't getting into a situation where somebody knows somebody and maybe they are able to further their partnership with the city through that. So we need a fair and equitable and transparent process that allows us to say we are accepting proposals, whether that's a one-time RFP or a multiple rounds of RFP, whether that's a situation where people are submitting ideas to a body that's identified in the Greenspace plan, I don't know. But they wanted to make sure that it was open to everyone, given that these are public assets.
And if I could just add onto that a little bit there too, I think going back to the screen space management plan, that's the process to develop the framework that identifies that future process on how we solicit for these public and private partnerships. So part of that, going through this engagement with the community and developing this green space management plan will set us up for determining how that process is going to work. You know, I think to add this, we want to make sure that we're being equitable and transparent and allowing opportunities for people that are interested in, or groups or businesses that are interested in these public and private partnerships to have that opportunity to propose in a way that's fair.
I see the geese are
Counselor-
flocking.
Yeah, the geese are flocking, and I think Counselor Stavenzord had hers up first.
Just curious if you've considered other tools. They're like much shorter tools than an RFP, like a request for proposal. So they're like request for proposals is huge. But you could do a request for qualifications or a request for interest, and those could be just like a one-page thing that partners would respond to. We could outline the parameters like insurance requirements, sharing of financial records, things along those lines that could be determined on the front end, and then they just respond with a short, one-page kind of proposal, and we keep that, for consideration on file.
Yeah, and I think the RFP was an idea that came up in the discussion. I don't think that we are married to any idea right now, and I think our recommendation as staff is that we need to develop this green space management plan and decide while we're doing that, what are the guidelines for these public-private partnerships? What are our goals and what is the process? Is there a better way than an RFP?
Right.
There could possibly be that. And I think that the Parks and Rec Board isn't necessarily concerned with how we solicit those, as long as we're doing so in a way that is equitable, transparent, and fair, but also allows for that entrepreneurship and creativity. Because in the discussion, when I mentioned some of the ideas that I've heard in passing, or some of the ones that I know have been kind of talked about elsewhere, a floating sauna on the Willamette, Parks and Rec Board looked at us and said, we can do that? And I said, I don't know, can we? You are the ones that are supposed to be providing us the direction. And so I think that they see this as an opportunity to put together a good plan and put together a framework that would allow our community to get creative and not only implement our goals for parks and green space, but also for economic development and affordability.
I would just encourage that the mechanism be as simple as possible so that partners who might not have a lot of experience or a lot of capacity to respond to government process could still respond and be creative. And we increase the opportunity for new and exciting proposals that way.
Oh, yeah. I just had a couple questions. So the example that you gave with the kayaks, let's say, kayak rental, what's the process for that person right now? Is there one?
I don't believe that we have one,
So,
not necessarily as a city. I don't.
Well, we've had a couple of instances of having kayak rentals. So we did have somebody who did a pop-up kayak thing probably in like 2018, brought in a trailer every day with kayaks on it. And they had some kind of some kind of a permit from the city and from NCPRD. And I thought more recently, I think Joseph maybe like 2 years ago was in conversation with somebody who wanted to do the same, but it never kind of came to be. But I mean, we have entertained that idea before and have had it at one point.
Yeah, and I think Adam's right that we don't have any kind of formal process for like those money-making business endeavors. We kind of shoehorn them through, I think, our temporary event permit process. But I think this conversation and this development of this plan enables us to do a more thoughtful path. I mean, the temporary event permit is a free permit. So
Mhm.
we're also giving away public space for a private enterprise to make money, and we're not, you know, that comes to with cost for the city and not reaping anything. So I think there are pathways on that case by case basis, as you know, you see in the staff recommendation. We don't want this to be a no, we'll not discuss any cool ideas until we have a management plan. But that it really is that kind of case by case thing until we can be a little more strategic and a little more thoughtful.
And if I just might add on to that, you know, because it was individual businesses coming to us and saying, hey, what about this idea? That made it feel that's more of like a one-off or that shoehorn sort of process. And the Parks and Rec Board really felt like, hey, if City of Milwaukee, if you're going to do this, if you're going to open up this, it needs to be something that more people are aware of, that you shouldn't just take it upon yourself to ask somebody, hey, can I get a temporary use permit to, you know, hawk my kayaks at Milwaukie Bay Park? It's like, no, we need to open this up and make this a formal process and then evaluate it on a case by case basis. We do have some questions.
Wait a second, the geese are still flying. Did you get all your questions? Okay. Council President.
I guess I would just echo the concerns that Councilor Stebbins raised. I think the RFP is really, really demanding on small businesses who want to put forward great ideas. I also struggle with making small businesses in Milwaukie will run the city's timeline as opposed to their own timeline. I'd much rather see some type of rolling process that is that case by case basis or allows for that an entrepreneur to bring forward an idea as opposed to the city saying, we will allow you to bring forward an idea on our own timeline. I guess I'm confused and I could use some clarity here. I'm hearing we're going to define a process in the Greenspace management plan, but before then, we're going to have an interim process for case by case bases that we'll go through, where I guess help me understand if people have good ideas now that
Yeah.
Well,
It's really about long term versus short term. So right now, and I see someone in the audience, is already, you know, we're already entertaining short term things. We do them through the temporary event permit process, and we're trying to be as flexible, amenable, and creative as ways we can do that. That's just different than saying, you know, we're going to for 12 months or for an ongoing basis lease, you know, lease or give this portion of a park over for this kind of private enterprise. So I think what we're saying is, until this management plan is done, we'll continue to field those cool creative ideas for those temporary short-term bases and use our best judgment and conversation and direction from you. I think when we actually brought this up last time to you, what you said is proceed with evaluating those and just prioritize maintaining as much access to the rest of the park as possible. So that's kind of what we've been doing. And that's what I think our staff recommendation is, until we can think about the right way to do solicitations or, you know, easy processes to invite ideas, whether it's on a rolling basis or a one-time basis, however we do it, for longer term or more permanent installations. Does that make any sense?
it does. It just feels like a lot of, it's just like a lot of like thought and time and process that has to go into accepting applications that we can review on a case by case basis as a city. Like I think about our naming policy and what it would look like to adapt something like that into the ability to like, have a platform for people to submit ideas on a short-term basis until it can be further refined with the management.
I think the
But
way,
maybe
yeah.
I'm not sure.
I think I just would frame it as, if an application came across my desk tomorrow saying, can we put a permanent ice cream stand in Milwaukie Bay Park? For Lunas. And, I would feel like that would be a very hard proposal for my staff to evaluate when you guys have directed us through the Parks and Green Space goal to come up with a management plan for how we manage that space. And it would be, it's kind of an easier thing for me to wrap my mind around from an operational standpoint on, okay, how do we kind of think about maintenance and security and access on a short-term basis? But if we're talking a permanent thing, that's harder. And so I actually think it's more about providing some transparency to our business partners that we know you're interested in this and we don't want to be telling you, yeah, maybe one day. We say we've been embarking on this plan. It's part of this goal. The plan will be developed next year. And through it, we're gonna wrestle with this question and get some public input and get some council input and come out with some really clear guidelines. But in the interim, if you have an idea for like a shorter term, couple day thing, submit an application and we're happy to talk.
That explanation started to break through.
And I think one thing that goes along with that is the second bullet point, which is, you know, you brought up the naming policy or the memorial and donation policies. You know, we had people who came to us and said, I want to donate a pension to this park, or I want to donate funds in exchange for some recognition to a project. And we had to say, you know, hey, we are not ready to write that policy yet. And now we've spent, you know, 9 months working on those policies, and those people are still waiting. And so the Parks and Rec Board felt as though it was really important that we hold to the timeline in the Parks and Green Space goal that you council has adopted for developing this green space management plan. We know that there are other topics, the one previous to this and some that are come after this, that greatly extend some of our work. But the Parks and Rec Board really felt as though this green space management plan and some of these different topics that we're wrestling with could be nestled into that plan, and we should move that forward. We've kind of gotten to many of these questions, but I guess the first question is, what sort of general feedback would you have for us? So is there any additional feedback that you might have?
I guess I have a sort of threshold question. We have someone who wants to testify. Should we let him testify and then come back to these questions? Or do you want us to answer these questions? And I mean, generally, it's not a public hearing, so we don't have the formal requirement that we hear from him before we make a decision, but it seems kind of comparable to that. So I guess I'm inclined to let him testify before we answer these questions.
I would definitely like to hear from him before I answer at least.
If this was a Parks and Rec Board meeting, I would look at the chair and say, well, this is your meeting.
I was about to do that. Mayor, it's your meeting. You can do whatever you want.
Okay, then Michael, you guys can stay there. Michael can come on this side, hit the red button. We'll give you 3 minutes. And Scott, you can be looking at Zoom to see if anybody else is raising hands.
Well, thank you, Mayor Beatty, and thank you, City Council, City Manager Emma, and thank you to staff. I am so appreciative that this topic is, you know, moving forward, right? So when I think about dissecting an issue into its like base parts, like let's distill it down to something really simple. Like, you know, I want to build a, you know, raised bed in a city park, a raised garden bed in a city park, right? And I don't want it to be temporary. I want it to be permanent, right? And I want to say, you know, everybody can use this raised bed, right? And maybe it'll say, you know, in memory of, you know, Michael's brother Johnny who passed away, right? So the city ripped that raised bed out because I didn't go through a process that's going to be developed in 2 or 3 years, you know? Like, I guess the question is, if a citizen or a business or a nonprofit wants to contribute, you know, something really neat and important and probably aligned with all of what everybody wants to see happen, we wouldn't entertain that. It sounds like, unless it's a temporary situation currently, we're going to delay any kind of contributions to our green spaces until we hire a consultant who will consult on which consultant to hire. And we write the report that will tell us which other reports we need to write. And then we got to do some citizen engagement, get a lot of feedback, right? We got to do all these studies, and I am dramatic and exaggerating and probably near my 3-minute limit. But I suppose I would love to see kind of just like common sense, practical ways to address citizens' desire to like get involved and do it, without waiting 3-4 years and lots of money on consultants and reports and citizen engagement studies that we already have. We have a lot of citizen engagement, feedback and information of what you would like to see happen. So anyway, thanks for listening. Appreciate it. Okay, bye.
Michael, I don't know if we got it. Can you give us your full name and city of residence, please?
Yeah, so I'm Michael Talcino, and I'm a small business owner in downtown Milwaukee. And my wife and I, we live in Portland. Thank you.
We still have a Zoom audience, but they are not raising their hands.
So with that, I'll turn it back over to Adam.
I would just add as just kind of a quick little staff response piece. Appreciate your comments, Michael. I don't think anyone's proposing a 3 to 4 year process. So within your goal action plan, the timeline for developing a green space management plan was in 2026. So just as a note for you all.
So these are the questions. They might look familiar to you. They were in the staff report. And so we're just looking for, general opinions on the topic. Specifically, and the second one is very long, but it's basically saying what directions you have for approving permanent or long-term profit or for-profit installations in our parks or green spaces prior to the completion of that plan, right, which would be done towards the end of 2026. Or should we continue to explore this question through plan development? And then the third one is, what additional questions do you council have to staff to investigate? Or is there specific types of engagement efforts that council would like to see us take? Do we need to convene our small business holders in a shortened, expedient way, which we might, learn from them and find and craft a process that is easier for them to respond to? Do we need to hold focus groups? Do we need to do community engagement, or do we just need to, right, as the testimony said, get to it?
Okay, I will tell you, I find question 2 sort of hard to parse through, but I'll call on Councilor Massey.
Yeah, thanks for the report. I'm obviously been privy to this from my work on the PARB. And so I think that we, quite frankly, don't know what we're doing yet. And so I have no problem with studying this, getting feedback, trying to understand not just what the businesses want, but what the community wants. Okay? Because everyone who wants to come in and set up a business in the parks, I don't know if the community wants that business. So I think there's a missing component here in trying to make these decisions. The idea of allowing a permanent development in a park is like kind of like signing a 10-year waste hauling agreement, and that's kind of a non-starter as far as I'm concerned. And I just think that we need to go slow. I know that businesses like to go fast and break things and all that other kind of stuff, whatever the buzzword of the day is and that kind of thing. But that's real interesting. But I think we need to go slow and see how this works. I certainly don't want a park that's nothing but vendors. Okay. Yeah, we might have a vendor dense event, July 4th, whatever it is. I don't know. Where we have a lot of vendors like we do at, the Solstice and that kind of thing. but that's okay, but they put up, their tents and, they're there for a day or two and we bring it back down. So I think the community we don't have any community thoughts on this, just yet. And I just think we need to go slow and we need to talk about things on a temporary basis or an event-based basis before we even consider anything long-term, because we just don't know.
So is there something that's between a temporary event and a permanent structure? I mean, I also have some skepticism about permanent structures in our parks, but we know, for example, Milwaukie Bay Park is not going to be under construction next summer. That's one of the few, definitive things I think we can say. Is allowing something to happen there over the summer months. Is that a temporary thing or is that a permanent thing or a long-term thing, if it's something that doesn't, build any kind of permanent structure and there is power there now, which was done by dam for the little float. So I guess, that's the question that's mulling around in my head. I don't know who was up first.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I would agree with Councilor Massey. I don't really want to commercialize our public parks. Kind of just sounds like odd to pay to play at a park that's the public has already paid for with their taxes, right? So, it irks me. Like I see the benefit of somebody getting a license or a permit to rent kayaks out for a season. That makes sense. But to have a permanent structure on a public property that's a commercial, that's a business that belongs to a business, it just irks me. And my question is, the biggest question of all is, how are you going to make it equitable if you have to pay for it? It doesn't make sense, right? Like parks right now are completely equitable because they're free. You add an element that requires people to pay, well, now you're cutting some people out of being able to enjoy that park or that amenity, right? The other question is, you got to look at how you're going to regulate something like that. If somebody wants to say, yeah, I need the whole space of Dogwood Park to do a yoga class and I want to charge people $20 to come to, and a family wants to go and play at that park, it's like, sorry, you got to be off this park that's public property because you won't pay to join the event that's happening here. So I see that there's some good that can come from this, but I also see that there's some pretty bad that can come from this and potentially open up Pandora's box and commercialize what little left we do have that belongs to the public. Because right now you got to pay for everything these days. Everything costs money. The one thing that doesn't is going out to our parks, right? Enjoying the day. And it would suck to walk down to a park and be told, hey, this is a closed event unless you got $20. So I think there's potential for something on a smaller scale, on a temporary scale, but something like bigger that would take up a lot of park space, that would literally alienate people and prevent people from enjoying the parks, especially like imagine if a business outside of Milwaukie did that and Milwaukie residents try to go to their own park and the business was like $20, right? Like, there's just something morally and ethically just doesn't sit well with me. So if we can find a way to make it equitable, I would like to listen because that's the trick there.
Council President?
Yeah, I hear the concerns. I think that I'm thinking about how do we build the system in which we can allow for private actors to bring forward amenities that don't like restrict our parks, but augment our parks and what's allowed. I think that kayak is a good example. Not everyone has the money to buy a kayak. Not everyone has the means to take a kayak down to Milwaukie Bay Park to go paddle around to access that bay of Milwaukie Bay Park. And so I think that providing a private service that someone will profit off of that augments the existing facilities in our park and allows for not restricted access, but expanded access is a good example of what that can look like. In the more medium term, I see a pathway to explore these conversations, and I appreciate that work being done. I guess what I'm thinking about as I look at these questions is what is the short-term pathway for us to have these conversations, kind of like what Councilor Kusurvati is saying. we might have skepticism, but how do we hear you out to hear what it might look like? I think of this, I would be curious to see what a like temporary use or pop-up process looks like. And then for a more like, I'm fine to hear proposals. I might disagree with that about a permanent installation, but I'm fine to hear them. And I think that in the short term, to have some type of process to hear them makes sense. I would think that it makes sense to have PARB accept a proposal like that. You could put it up on Engage, and then you could bring it to council review vote. I think that that's kind of how we would approach ordinances and other things like that. And we're a public body that is elected by the public to represent the public. Having a process like that doesn't seem out of the norm of what council could do. It's a process that certainly could be refined, but in the short term, I think approaching something like that, or at least having some type of pathway for the conversation, it doesn't mean that we have to vote one way or another on any proposal that's brought forward. But I think what I'm hearing is what is, in the short term, a way that we can hear these ideas and provide a forum for public discussion.
Councilor Kosrabani?
And real quick, I do want to say, first off, Michael, I love your sauna spot, and it's great. Does wonders. I don't do the cold plunge. I just do the cold bucket. But I do think to the example, because I did want to speak on the example you gave. I do think there's two different things that we're potentially talking about here. One of them is, hey, let's put a community, a raised bed for a garden. I was going to say flat bed, for a community garden, and everybody can enjoy it. Versus, hey, I'm going to put a raised bed for a community garden, and you're going to pay for the vegetables. So I think there's two different things that we're talking about. We should make it easier for community members to want to do something like that, where it does allow community members to take part in it. But as opposed to, but there's got to be a separate process if we even want to go that route of saying, I'm going to put something here, you got to pay for it to use it. So I think it's a little bit, there's two separate conversations potentially going on here. Or two different routes that we could go, is what I should say.
Okay, I'm going to throw a completely different question at you, which is this, and maybe I'm just not remembering, but this green space management plan, is this about parks that NCPRD manages for us? Is this about other types of green spaces?
It's about both.
Both.
Okay, it's about both. So it's about, our natural resource areas that we have that aren't parks that NCPRD manages. And it's also about these spaces that NCPRD manages.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification.
I don't know if I have coherent thoughts, but I have a couple of thoughts. I think that sometimes when parks are left to be developed or to be maintained with solely public dollars, then those parks languish. Then you find deferred maintenance, then you find a lack of playground equipment or benches or ADA access or things along those lines. So I think that there is a place for the blending of public and private funding to be able to augment what we have available in our parks, as the council president said, to create vibrant programming in some way. But I agree with Councilor Kosrabani around the exclusivity of what that pay for programming can create in our communities. And I think that in Oregon and in Milwaukie, we feel really strongly about open green space. We feel really strongly about that being a great amenity in our communities, and we want that to be accessible for everyone. But I think that there are some examples of the way that these two worlds, public and private, can kind of blend together. Like the Parks and Recreation Department does have pay to play programming. They do have classes that you can sign up for. There's yoga in the park, and there's, Tai Chi and things like that. And some of those you just show up and you can do. Some of them you have to sign up to do, to kind of cover like the instructor cost. I think of community gardens. Those are public benefits, I believe, you know, but you do have to pay for, you know, the plot or contribute in some way. But those are permanent, semi-permanent structures. I think about sponsored benches, you know, that create more of a place for people to sit and enjoy the park, or if they have mobility issues, that might create a way, you know, for someone to enjoy or participate in park programming a little bit better. I also think about like our Carefree Sundays events, you know, like there are sponsorships for things that happen in the parks on those days. And those are businesses coming together and doing something in the parks, but it's a temporary use, it's a non-permanent kind of a thing. Those are free generally, but the business gets the benefit of having, you know, their name out there and the publicity out there. So I think what I would be interested in exploring further would be some type of a public-private temporary use like agreement that we might be able to do, or at least the process to solicit ideas for permanent or semi-permanent, you know, like, I guess I think about like Milwaukie Bay Park, right? If we had, if Sonaglow somehow came into like, you know, $1 billion, and you were like, I'm gonna build the best splash pad down in Milwaukie Bay Park, but it's gonna be a cold plunge splash pad. I think if we were able to provide that free of charge for, you know, for all the residents that might want to be there, that would be amazing. I would not necessarily have a problem putting Sonic Glow on it. Because the alternative is that we don't have some place for residents to go and have that augmentation of the park experience. So I'd be interested in looking into this further. That's the short of my soliloquy. The, something that would be temporary that we could look at, or future councils could look at reapproving, you know, after a year, after 3 years or something like that, so that we're not necessarily like tying the hands of future councils, would be helpful. Or even if private partners are interested in doing some type of enhanced programming and we're able to help support the permitting process, or we're able to make it easier for them to be involved in that partnership, I think at least that opens up the door to the conversation. I think we should be open to that, because public funds are not going to support all of our amenities as long as we need them to. And we have more and more people who are coming into Milwaukie to live in apartments, and apartments don't have green space. That's all I got.
So you asked us questions and we just gave you more questions.
I know, and I'm trying to figure out what the direction is. I mean, I think I'm hearing a few things. I'm hearing that you want something, you don't want to wait, you know, for any consideration of any interesting idea that might stretch the bounds of temporary or short term until this management plan is done. But I think I'm hearing some of you say, let's do an active solicitation, which I will share is a lot of work. I mean, even if we do it as a simple thing, it's still, we're very much proactively saying, we're engaging and we're actively, you know, asking for ideas, which then we have to vet and go through. I've also heard then, no, we should just be passive about it. So if people bring ideas to us, consider it, maybe bring those here. And there's pros and cons for both of those. The passive approach, it's who knows who to call, and who knows who to come. But the active approach is more work. So I think I'm still a little, I'm not quite hearing what the consensus direction is. I mean, obviously we're doing this Greenspace management plan. It's in your goal action plan. We're gonna do it. And I think we obviously need to keep wrestling with this question through it. But the operational actions you want to see the city take in the interim are still a little unclear to me. Again, we have our temporary event permit process. We are using that as the venue for considering things that I think fall into this sort of unknown category and vetting them on a case by case basis. And I can commit to bringing anyone that raises some red flags to you as a body. But if you're asking for more than that, I need to know if 3 or more of you are asking for that tonight, if that makes sense.
So the question is, are we asking for something more than the short-term, case by case event permit that we have now, sort of before the end, late 2026, so over the next year before we get to having this green space management plan?
I would just be curious to know if any businesses, take advantage of that. Like, you don't need to tell us right now, but that's a piece of information that would be helpful. You mean the current temporary event? Yes, they do. Well, I mean, yes, we have folks who have solicited ideas that are of a temporary nature, that are a business idea, and that are utilizing that process in that way to engage with the city about that engagement.
It's also important to point out, we are talking about just a couple of the millions of different varieties of partnerships that we could enter into. Another way to think about this is, we have that very lovely softball complex at North Clackamas Parks, and we allow people to come in and program that through their leagues. And there is, whether they're a for-profit or a nonprofit, there is some small amount of revenue that is generated. It doesn't necessarily have to be the business that is building the permanent structure. So for example, again, the softball complex has a concession stand. Do we enter into some sort of franchise agreement or lease agreement? Or do we need to make it a partnership where some of those goals that we've identified as a city are also being implemented along with just, hey, we've got the concession stand, we would like you to make money off of it. That's an agreement. A partnership would be, can we advance those goals? And so I think what HARB wrestles with is a lot of the things that we're wrestling with here today, which is how do we find that balance? How do we allow for entrepreneurship? But how do we protect this space, which is one of the last places where you can go to for free, that anyone can go to at any time? And that's the balance that HARB thinks that we need to find.
I mean, with just what I just heard, then it sounds like what we're doing is already accomplishing that. I mean, the temporary use permit, I mean, it sounds like we're already making it work with that.
Microphone.
How long is a temporary use permit?
No, the honest answer is so, I don't have it specific. We don't have it. It's 14 days or less. It's vague kind of intentionally.
So anything over 14 days, we don't have a process for, is more what I'm trying to hammer down.
We do not have a date. Like, we don't have a certain date. Right?
Okay.
It's temporary. It's left vague to invite these kinds of conversations.
So it sounds like direction is more about refining that, what's already there, than it is about creating something new. So I mean, I'm not hearing anybody wanting a permanent.
I mean, here's what I might throw out to see what my colleagues think. I think that in a year, we're going to have some type of more concrete process that's developed through our green space plan. I think in the short term, if there are proposals that take Councilor Massey's example, summer long pop up in the park, is that happening through a temporary use program or not? I'd say just as a interim basis for the year until we develop our green space proposal, we have a temporary process where staff develop a really short, like few question that you have to answer. You can submit a proposal to PARB. They create a recommendation. We put it up on Engage. We get public feedback, and then we have a council session to approve that type of thing or consider that and vote on it. I think it's something that lasts for longer than 3 months, probably needs an actual public input. And as just a short-term, year-long process that gives the opportunity for businesses to bring forward ideas. We don't have to quiet them for a year. They can still engage with the city while we develop an actual process.
How long do you think that's going to take? What do you mean to do that? Because that means you'd have to probably submit your permit, what, 2 months in advance? Before the 3 months we're going to do it? So that's what I'm saying. We kind of already have a process in place. If somebody wants an extended one, then I think it should be a case-by-case basis, and then it comes back to council.
Counselor Massey?
Yeah, I love every member of the PARB. You don't want the PARB in this approval process. The PARB provides, recommendations on policy and that kind of thing. They're not in the process of doing city manager's job, approving, permits, and that kind of thing. So, I, you know, the PARB is inappropriate in the process of approving or disapproving permits. They're gonna offer us advice about, this green space program and all of that kind of thing and the parameters of this. But that's not really the role of the PARB to be, vetting individual, permits. And I would say that we're not either.
So to circle back to to the question of what's short term and what's long term. I guess in my mind, we're really talking about next summer. What are we going to do next summer? Because nobody's probably proposing to do anything in the park. Well, I mean, we know there's some light walk or something, but there's probably not a lot of proposals for February, March in the parks. So what it's about next summer, and we all focus on Milwaukie Park. It could be other parks too. Do we want some ability to propose a summer use ahead of having finished our green space management plan for next summer? And to me, that's the way I'm distilling the question.
I think that's fair, Mayor. I will say there is a proposal, I think, for the winter.
Oh,
Which is why we wanted to get peppering this conversation because Councilor Massey's right. I mean, this is one of those things that this temporary event permit process is a power delegated to me, and I make these cases. And where usually this stuff, is pretty straightforward, pretty cut and dry. I make some judgment calls, but then when things start to kind of push those bounds, that's when we bring it to you for some policy direction. And I think, what we were to kind of really simplify, I think there's sort of three paths I can take. We could say, hey, businesses, we're not approving anything for the next year because we're doing this management strategy. I don't think I'm hearing any of you say that. Step two is we kind of limp along with what we've got now and you continue the delegated authority you've given staff. And just so you know, when we get a temporary event permit process, we share it with a bunch of people for review, public safety, natural resources, to just kind of weigh its merits.
and NCPRD, right?
And NCPRD will have to get their own permit for NCPRD if it's at an NCPRD park. And then I make an operational executive decision. And then I guess option three was create something totally new because you want to move on this even faster or, with more direction and clarity at this point. I think what I'm hearing is kind of variations on the middle, but maybe some interest in or kind of some direction to me as your operational executive decision maker here that be as creative and lenient as possible when we're posed with interesting proposals that bridge this line between our economic development goal and our parks and green space goal. But I think, just so you know how I've done this in the past, if someone were to propose something on Elk Rock Island, which is a sensitive natural habitat, that's kind of a no, until at least we have a much more robust policy framework for me to make that decision.
If I could add to that, I think if we go back to where we were recommending, we're not recommending, part of the recommendation is we want to make sure that we're limiting the long-term piece right now as we figure it out. These temporary uses and whatever we define temporary, is it the months of the summer? Is it 90 days? That's fine, but long-term pieces, we want to limit those right now until we develop this framework, but utilize our current special use permit process that we have in place right now.
And if I could just add one more thing, I think and this kind of gets down to that fundamental point, which is what is a business agreement and what is a partnership? And the Parks and Rec Board really felt that we as a community need to identify certain goals. And that if we are opening up our publicly owned assets, our parks and our green spaces to partnerships, they really need to be partnerships in fulfilling those goals. And those goals haven't been identified yet. So we can continue to use this temporary use permit in the way that we're doing it, but those goals that make it a true partnership, as opposed to just an agreement to lease out the concession stand or to rent out your kayaks. If we haven't identified those goals, according to the Parks and Rec Board, that's not a partnership. That's a business agreement.
I still am hearing some confusion about, are there things outside the scope of a temporary use permit? And I don't know if you have clarity on how you want us to act. I would say in the intervening months until we have an actual green space management plan, if you put that on the council agenda and allow us to discuss, if there are things that you feel like you don't have clear direction on as a council, I think that in the short term, that's the best way to do it, as opposed to saying anything outside this small, clearly defined scope is a no, saying we can have the conversation here on the dais and make those decisions, or anything that you're concerned about.
I guess my take on it is I'm at your middle ground of, I'd like to, I'd like to activate the parks. I do think there's a balance. I'd like to maybe I'd like to next summer or over the winter, consider things that would, activate the parks without building any permanent infrastructure, obviously. But I do think that the sort of considerations that people have raised, how much of the park is it taking up? Is it impeding other people's ability to use the park? What does it cost? Is it, is the cost only, covering the cost of producing whatever it is, or is it a big profit generator? Is it, what is it for the equity piece that, the PAR raised. So PAR raised equity, transparency, creativity. Okay. Yeah, I'm fine leaving those decisions in your hands personally. And yeah, if you yell help, if you get a hard one that you want to bring back to us, fine. But
Usually what happens is when I say no, they come to you.
Yeah,
And
that's
say
true.
help, so,
That's
but yeah, I think that's a fair way to proceed.
others.
And I guess just what I'm gonna, what I'll say is that we're not gonna go actively solicit unless you give direction to it. We will, I think we talk very openly about both our economic development and our parks and green space goal, but I just wanna make sure I'm not getting direction to go put out a call for come one, come all, submit your temporary event permit ideas.
So one other thing if I could add too, I think this was helpful. As we develop the scope of work for our green space management plan, we want to make sure that we're considering these types of things as we develop that framework for public and private partnerships within that green space management plan. So it was helpful hearing all the different perspectives there.
Okay. It seemed very circular, but I guess we got to some kind of clarity. Okay. Does anybody need a break or anything else on that? We're done? Okay. Okay, we're going to take a break till 8:45. We are, this is 8:45. So everybody's done. Okay, we're back on the air. And our next item is Willamette River water quality testing. And we have Peter Pasquarelli again and our climate and natural resources manager, Katie Gavaris.
So, we're here tonight to briefly, hopefully briefly discuss the Willamette River recreational water quality testing. I put together a staff report in early October. I know there's been some consideration, some community members have brought up the subject of with an interest to have routine water quality sampling of the Willamette out in front of the Milwaukie Bay Park area for recreational purposes. So we've done a little bit of research on our end to take a look at what that might look at and provide a recommendation. And sort of the bottom line up front, I'll say is our recommendation is that we don't want to do that for a couple different reasons. And we can get into that. One being cost and capacity. But if you want to move on to the next slide. So a little background here. You know, there is regional water quality sampling going on right now. Portland Parks, or Portland has Check the Rec program for their recreational programs that they have. That's actually managed by the Bureau of Environmental Services. They do samples beginning in May through September, weekly at I think 9 different sites during the summer, and then I think 4 or 5 of those sites they continue to do water quality sampling throughout the year. They do it once a week, and it's focused strictly on E. coli. So it's a bacterial E. coli sample. They do those tests. They analyze those in house. They have their own lab. They have the staff to do that. Our partners, Water Environment Service at Kellogg Dam, or not Kellogg Dam, but at the Kellogg Resource Facility. They do sampling as well for their permit requirements, being a wastewater treatment provider. I think Greg Geis was here earlier last month in October.
Well, and I asked him at that time if he could make his testing somehow, because, you know, when we were first approached about this, their testing goes into some deep 6 DEQ database that's really hard to maneuver, and could we somehow make it more readily available? And I assume we haven't had an answer on that. He said he would look into that.
Yeah,
Assuming you
I
haven't-
haven't heard back from
Okay.
him yet on that,
Okay.
but I can follow up with him and ask him that. But they test, you know, weekly, and you know, 3 times a week actually, and they have a monthly reporting that they have to do to the state to make sure that they're in compliance. And they have to meet certain requirements there. They test for E. coli, but they also test for other parameters as well, but not a broad spectrum of, you know, waterborne diseases or anything like that.
And to confirm, Katie, let me know if I'm getting this wrong. They test their effluent, so they test what comes out of the plant. They don't test in the river.
I think they're testing down in the bottom of the river.
Oh, well, they actually are, they're testing as it leaves their treatment process. So they'll probably grab a sample, a continuous sample, of what's going on during that day. And it's not in the creek, it's at some point at the end of their treatment process.
Okay, I thought that, well, anyway, I thought that
I mean,
they had said it was down. I don't know how they would collect it from down there, but
Yeah.
it's not collected from down.
like, in my experience with a wastewater treatment plant back in Illinois, we had a sampling point that was at the very end of the treatment process after we disinfected, and we took continuous samples from that point.
Mhm.
But it wasn't at the point of actual discharge into the creek. There's a pipe that was between these points.
Okay.
So we do have some of those samplings going on. The Portland Check the Rec program, I think their most southerly point is up near Waverly. and then Wes is, just south of Milwaukie Park. So we're sort of like in between there. So those are the sampling programs that are going on right now, right? I think from our perspective, and I think I outlined this in the report, there's some things that we need to consider if we were sampling and providing that input. And there's a lot to that we have to focus on in terms of managing public expectations related to safety and responsibility. Right now, we don't have that responsibility for maintaining water quality in that green. But by taking those samples and reporting those samples out there may be an expectation from the community that we do have a responsibility for that. In addition, it is duplicative of existing state and regional rules. DEQ does algae testing, and our regional partners, Portland and West, also are currently testing. If we did testing and we're reporting, that could have some unanticipated regulatory consequences for us on our NPDES permit, as we sample, and if there was, if there were problems that popped up, that could come back to us in terms of how we manage our stormwater. That would have future impacts on our stormwater management plan. An example of that would be, from what I saw back in Illinois, in nutrient sampling at the discharge points of wastewater plants. The DEQ or the Illinois EPA at that point in time would often utilize process sampling to make determinations on how to make adjustments to permits. So they could utilize that information, and I'm not saying that would happen, but there's a possibility that we could come up with stricter permit requirements on our NPDES stormwater permit plan. So it could be an unforeseen consequence. I think the other thing is we really don't have the internal capacity to go out there and sample every week and process samples. We don't have a lab. We'd have to take samples every week and bring it to a lab and have somebody analyze that and pay for that. That would be challenging for our perspective. So, and then what's the slide there, please? Yeah. So our recommendation really is that we don't begin our own water quality sampling or reporting program. We can certainly work with West to see if they can be more transparent with their water quality sampling that they provide, and work with them to maybe they can report that on their website. Just see what that is. But I would not recommend the city getting into that business right now.
So, do you have an idea, if we were just to contract out and say we want to pay a lab to come once a week for, whatever, 4 months, 5 months, and post that, and give us that data. Do you have any idea what that would cost?
Well, when I was looking at it internally, using our own staff to do that, it was going to be in that $10,000 to $15,000 range
Per season?
per season.
Okay.
Hiring a consultant or a firm to do that, it would be more. It would be.
I mean, we're going to have to take
more
it.
than-
Okay. I mean, we're going to have to take it to a lab anyway. It seems like letting them be the collectors of it is the path of least burden of the staff, right? Let them
It would
come
be less,
take it.
it would certainly be less of a burden on the staff, but it would be more costly. It would cost us more, but we could certainly take a look and see if we could get pricing to do that.
Questions, thoughts? Counselor Massey?
Are we in the question period only?
No, it's
I
not a
think
public.
we're done with, the staff report is done. So
Good. I think that this is a solution in search of a problem that does not exist. I think that there's, I agree with a lot of things that were said in this report. Actually, my research says it's not 5 places they sample it in, around Portland, it's 8. And as you said, the most southerly part is Waverly. They also do it in Southwood River Park, Dock. Lo and behold, the United States Geologic Survey also does sampling in Portland. The DEQ is doing Portland. I'm sorry, the West is doing their own sampling. The DEQ is doing sampling. And I found these in about 2 minutes. Okay, so there's a lot of sampling going on. And I agree that we can maybe help the interested parties find this information more readily. But there's a lot of information out there that I don't think needs to be duplicated. And this may sound like a small task or inexpensive task, but it's just like, why do it if it's not needed? I don't think it is needed.
So all those people are testing for E. coli?
DEQ is doing algae.
Okay.
The U.S. Geologic Survey is doing like for every element of the universe, I think.
Mhm.
So
Well, I mean, we partner with USGS at a couple sampling stations, not in Willamette, but in, was it Johnson Creek? To do sampling, to meet some of our sampling requirements for our stormwater permit. But it's not, we're not sampling to see specifically what the E. coli counts are in the lab.
Well, I will say, I like the idea of giving people more information. I do take the point that we have to, I mean, I'm surprised when I look at Portland's, those, whatever it's called, Check the Rec website, which says it's safe to swim. It's like, the lawyer in me says that should say E. coli levels are below, hazard or below bench lines set by the DEQ or something. But I mean, safe to swim is more than just E. coli. It's PFAS, it's other things. It depends on the person's own susceptibility. And there's not a standard where we can say it's safe today and it's not safe tomorrow. But what we could say is we're under, the water quality here is under these bench lines that have been set by the proper authorities. And I kind of like the idea of giving people more information. I'd like to encourage people to swim and to use the water in other than motorboats. But so I guess that's where I'm coming from. I guess the point you raised about the potential impact on our NPDES permit does give me some pause. But it's, it would depend on what substances we're testing for, right? Whether it's likely to come back to us on that. Do you think an E. coli would come back to us on that? Probably. We wouldn't be the,
I mean, it's data
yeah,
that DEQ could use to evaluate
yeah.
effectiveness of our stormwater treatment program. I think my concerns, that's one of the big concerns, the fact that by putting that data, publishing that information, the city publishing that, is like, it feels like there's some certification of what we're saying this meets the standard, and it's safe. If somebody gets sick, they could come back and say, well, the city said it was fine, it wasn't, and are we subject to some sort of liability?
Councilor Massey, I think you were first. You turned.
Waverly Country Club The most recent sample is E. coli count below 10 organisms per 100 milliliters. An E. coli count less than 406 is below the health standard set by the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. It's there.
Well, and it is a valid point that the water coming from Wes is not going very far to get to Waverly Country Club. So it's probably not dramatically different in Milwaukee Bay than those numbers.
I'm just saying that the fidelity of information that you mentioned was not there, is in fact there.
You're reading Portland's side.
I go into the, check the rec.
Right, but if you read at the top, they use language like, it's safe to swim, which is not language I would ever propose to put on a website as the headline on a website. If you go to the first page of the link that we were given in the staff report, it says it's safe to swim. And then in smaller type, it says, you know, it's under these benchmarks or whatever.
I don't know what are you looking for?
What am I looking for?
Yeah.
No, I'm not looking for. What do you mean, what am I looking for?
Well, I've just given you the exact, laboratory
Yeah,
sample
yeah.
results.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you're looking for. You're saying that the Portland site is only saying it's safe to swim, and there's a higher fidelity of information there.
No, I'm saying you can't say it's safe to swim based on one kind of test.
I think the mayor is saying if we were to do something like this, she would like more high fidelity data, not any disclaimer or statement of safety.
All we can say is it's under these benchmarks because there are so many other things in the Willamette coming from Eugene, coming from, down Kellogg Creek, down Johnson Creek, through past precision Caspar. So we can't attest for everything in the Willamette and that it's safe for everyone. We can only say it's safe by terms of E. coli.
If you want to do that quantity of sampling, it's $15,000 is just.
I'm not proposing doing that quality of sampling. I'm not at all proposing. I'm saying I would like us to provide the public with more information. I don't know what I would sample for, to be honest. I kind of asked that of Mr. Calcanio today, beyond E. coli. But I take your point that the E. coli test for Waverly is pretty darn low. And so there's not a reasonable chance that we're having excessive levels of E. coli in Milwaukie Bay, given how close they're testing. I took that to be your point, and I think that's a point we'll take. Council President.
I'll defer to Councilor Savendra first, if she'd like.
I'm kind of treading water between a point of order and a recap. Is the ask here, is the ask here to determine what the language is? Or the ask is actually like, what is council's interest in further testing
Yes,
water?
that's the ask.
Okay, 'cause I felt like, sorry, there's so many puns. You're a little downstream? No. What is missing between the available data and what community advocates are asking for? What is missing?
I think, what's missing there is the data from Wes. Wes, that's not readily available and online somewhere. We do have that point of data at Waverly that is part of the Check the Rec program. But we also don't have specific data out in front of the Milwaukie Bay Park, right? That's, and that data is, single sample taken on one day, and it doesn't necessarily reflect what might happen on those other days, dependent on changing conditions in the river. Whether it's a weather event that impacts the water and it brings in additional contaminants from upstream, So it's indicative of a sampling that happens on a specific day, right? And that sampling on the Check the Rip program, they do it weekly from May to September at 8 places, and then other times of the year, I think there are 4 or 5 sites of those 8 places that they do monthly sampling as well. So
Okay, so locations, frequency, also substances?
and substances, yeah. So you know, E. coli is not necessarily indicative of parasites or virus. It's just indicative of bacterial content.
And to go back just a bit to your points around transparency of West data. If their data are more readily available to the public, then what gap will persist? Would it still be those 3 things?
Of Wes's data, I think it paints a clearer picture, but it doesn't paint that picture exactly right out of.
Mhm. Mhm. If residents were interested in an individually funded effort to sample some of that water, how would they go about proceeding with that?
The lab to figure out what they wanted to sample for, and get the sampling set from the lab and instructions on how to take that sample and go take a sample.
Okay, thank you.
And then bring it back to the lab for analysis.
I'm gonna take the council, or, I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off. I'm gonna take the council president's question or comment, and then I do have someone online who wants to testify, and I don't know if Mr. Calcano wants to testify as well, but we'll let the council president go first.
I guess I kind of get back to, I'm gonna go upstream as possible. It seems like the folks who are asking for this want to have data that we can point to as a city to talk about why it's safe to swim in the Willamette, to get more folks out doing that activity. I think Councilor Massey's right that there's data that we can piggyback off Portland to collect. I think Mayor Beatty's right that there's data that's not collected and just E. coli sample that we would want to do this. It's going to cost a lot of money to do regular check-ins on all of these different factors over an entire summer. But I wonder about the workload it would take to put together a city website that says at the start of next summer, it's safe to swim in Milwaukie or whatever that might be, whatever Justin thinks is okay for us to say, but compiling the data from different sources, West, City of Portland, and then is there some one-time test that we want to do with different things? I know it's not going to be comprehensive enough to, like, there will be fluctuations day to day, but something that we could point to that says, at the start of swim season, we tested for these factors so that community members and our businesses and folks around town can point to this and say we have some type of factual basis for the fact that it's safe to swim at Elk Rock Island and Milwaukie Park.
Thanks for that question. I think I would really caution about taking one-time tests and using that as a reliable source of what the conditions of a water body, a dynamic water body that's constantly changing, minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day, as reflective of what's in that water. So I don't think that would be helpful and would really sort of put us in a bind, saying that, hey, we did this test in May. This is what we saw then, and it's Milwaukee residents, if you're interested in swimming, you're safe or not. So I don't think it's it's reflective or good practice to do that. So.
To take two public comments. So first, online, Mr. Dave Cadwallader, give you 3 minutes each.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you. Thanks.
Oh, hi, this is Dave Cadwallader. I am a resident of Milwaukie. I am also vice chair of the Island Station Neighborhood Association. Tonight, I am speaking just as a citizen, not on behalf of the NDA, although our NDA did write a letter in support of this proposal. Just a few comments, and I really appreciate all of the effort that was put into preparing this report. And I agree that these are all very valid concerns. Sometimes when I focus on all of the things that can go wrong, my wife challenges me to think about all the things that could go right. And I haven't heard a lot of discussion about that tonight. So I invite you all to just take a minute to allow yourself permission to do that. We've been talking a lot about Milwaukie Bay Park here tonight. We've been waiting for that splash pad since 2017. How great would it be to have a place to cool off on these increasing number of days where it's above 90 degrees? And to have a place where it could be a magnet to attract people who, you know, maybe you're right. Maybe there's not already more than a handful of people who are going down there to swim. But what if there could be? I hear the concerns about, like, we can't commit to regular testing, continuous testing, that conditions change frequently. I'm also reminding us about our drinking water quality report that we produce, and that's not continuously tested. Maybe it is, but the report is sent out periodically, right? The residents are not asking for a day-to-day report on the water. And I know that, you know, drinking water conditions can change too, right? So we know that there's inherent risk in producing reports periodically, but that shouldn't stop us from sharing any data or collecting any data. Also, on the subject of Waverly, yes, that is close, but I didn't hear any mention of Kellogg Creek and Johnson Creek that deposit right into Milwaukie Bay right there. And, you know, if you're down there, and I'll be the first to say, you know, my kids and we go down there, we go to Elk Rock Island. And sometimes I worry about what's coming down those creeks. And I just sort of say, it's probably building immunity, it's fine. But even if we just got a periodic report as a parent, that would make me feel a degree more of confidence rather than I'm just kind of blindly trusting this here. So that's all. And I just wanted to say, you know, again, let's try to think of all the things that could go right. Let's think about how this could be a boost for visitors to Milwaukie Bay Park, bringing more visitors downtown on summer days, a boost to the economy. Let's try to think about all the things that could go right. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to ask, and I asked this question of all three because we now have a third person who wants to testify. If you're recommending testing, are you recommending testing more than E. coli? And if so, what else?
Well, let's think about the water, for example. Are we testing, when we send our water quality reports to the residents, are we sending just what's legally required of us by law? Or are we kind of just doing our best to say, like, hey, if we want people to feel as comfortable as possible drinking this water, what are the things that we should test for? What should we disclose? So I think, yes, it should be for more than just E. coli. If you know, we consult the experts and we think, hey, if you wanted to increase the confidence that when you and your family go swimming here, what are the things we should know about? I don't have a specific list, but I think that we can piggyback on what other cities have done.
Okay, thank you. Michael, you're next.
Thank you, Mayor Beatty, and thank you, Council, and thank you to the staff for preparing this report. My name is Michael, a small business owner in downtown Milwaukie. if you had a public park that had a stigma or reputation for violence, gang activity, you might ask the police to, patrol more. You might install more lighting. You might install a security camera. And what would be the consequence of that? Well, maybe families would feel more comfortable using the city park. So the question I have for council is, do you want to live the values that you have decided upon and put down on paper? Did that mean anything? Is that lip service, or is it action? Creating a testing program at Milwaukie Bay Park to reduce the stigma that it's not safe to swim there for families who don't have the money to pay for a public swimming pool access, right? This is an equity issue, despite the fact that wasn't included in the staff report. This is an equity issue. Families who want to help their kids learn how to swim and don't have the money to pay for swim lessons and are hindered by the stigma that there is toileting going on in Jansen Creek from the unhoused population, and that's flowing out into Milwaukie Bay Park, right? That's not Waverly, okay? So, we all have a lot of privilege and wealth, and we ought to think about the folks who don't and what hinders them from accessing nature and creating, there's place attachment theory, right? This idea that we belong to a community because we have fallen in love with its natural resources, its beauty, its sense of community, its ability for the elected officials to understand that there's a need and address that need with a common sense, practical, low-cost way to increase environmental stewardship through place attachment theory, to increase environmental stewardship, to help families with mental health through winter swimming, to help families create bonds and connections to nature and have a cool place that costs no money to cool off in the summer. So I would ask council, do we want to live our values and address the needs of the citizens who want to use our public parks and are held back from that because of the stigma that is real and exists? And I think you ask anybody who's been in Milwaukie a while, they'll tell you there's a stigma that exists. And it's not a stigma
into
about,
the water.
There's a stigma that it's not healthy or safe to swim at Milwaukie Bay Park because you have historical issues that have been remedied, but we ought to do our best as a community to help people, to help change that stigma. Just like you have let's say a public park with a reputation for gang violence, right? The elected officials might say, well, we don't have a responsibility to put in more lighting or to make sure that we reduce the stigma, but isn't that the goal of our public parks, that they're used, right? And I would just...
You're out of
I gotta be the one to cut you off, but I like that the more heat you get, the sweater comes off. It works good.
I'm used to sweating.
Okay, thank you. And then back to online, we have Jacob Sherman. Jacob,
Hey there, can you hear me?
we can hear you. Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you, Mayor Beatty, city councilors. For the record, Jacob Sherman, your favorite Ardenwald neighborhood resident. I'm submitted some written testimony, but just wanted to chime in as well to throw my support behind this. I do think in many ways what we're focusing on is how we can combat stigma and misinformation. And water quality testing might be an approach. There might be other more effective approaches as well. But I think as others have testified, I think this is real. I've recently been doing some work to try and support swimming access in Milwaukie Bay Park. And on social media, I've been exposed to kind of the litany of misperceptions. Annie F. Ew. Karen, telling me about all the other things that go up on upstream. The Willamette is gross, puke emoji. I would never put my kids in that water. Nauseous emoji. Anyone who swims in the Willamette isn't from here. throw up emoji. The Willamette River is nasty. This is just a small sampling of the comments that I and others have seen online as we've talked about how the Willamette River really is a gem. It is as we all talk about when we're thinking about Milwaukie Bay Park. The river is such an amenity, and it's not something to just look at. It's not like a piece of art on the wall at a museum. But I think as others have kind of testified, it's a free, no-cost place for people to recreate and stay cool as our summers are getting hotter and hotter. So again, maybe there's an opportunity to piggyback on testing other jurisdictions are doing. Maybe there's an opportunity to take some of that basic testing other jurisdictions are doing and put it on our own website. Maybe there's other opportunities to write about river access and the pilot or other things like that. But, for generations, rivers all around the world, including here in our own backyard, have been used for waste. And we've really changed things in the last 20 years. And I think we should be telling that story and helping people feel more comfortable. So hope you will support this effort or other efforts like this to get people in the water. Things like the little float were really amazing, and I think this is a big economic development play for us. And thank you for the opportunity to testify tonight.
Thank you. Do you have suggestions on specific substances to test for?
I don't. I think I would look probably to kind of best practice in terms of what others are doing. And I think if Portland is just looking at E. coli, maybe that as a benchmark could be effective enough.
Okay, thank you. All right, I see your goose, but actually Councilor Koster-Body had one up, or was about to put one up before the public comment. So I'm going to let him go first.
Yeah, I just have some, I understand where the public is coming from, right? But I think that, the stigma is not Milwaukie Bay Park. The stigma is the entire Willamette River we're talking about here, right? So, that's the other thing. Like, you're talking about a stigma for an entire river that doesn't just flow from Wade to west, flows through Oregon, right? So, I don't know if anything we do will ever take away those stigmas, because you're always hearing something about the Willamette, right? So I'm not saying we shouldn't do anything about it, but I don't want to be held responsible for the entire river. I'm trying to, say that it's clean. I just don't know if that necessarily falls on us. But my question really is about if we can provide that information that isn't going to be costly, because that's the other thing. Like, how do you do it without it costing the city too much, right? Because we're not exactly in the best places financially, along with any other local municipality. And then also the timing, right? Like the periodic. So if you get something that's posted a month ago, I don't know if a report from a month ago is going to make me feel safe about going into the water if it's a month old. Like, that's the thing. Like, what's the period of how often you're testing? Because if you want people to really be safe and you want to break the stigma, you're going to have to test quite frequently for over an extended period of time, so people get used to seeing those results. Then is when you can kind of pull the pedal off a little bit, because it's a psychological thing. It's not just about the numbers, right? It's not just about what's in there. It's a psychological thing. They have to see consistency, that it's clean. But if you're only doing one report a month or one report every 3 months, I don't really know if you're really moving the needle on the stigma, and I don't really know if you're moving the needle on people wanting to swim in the Willamette. So it's really about, weighing the two, right? Because at the other end of the side, just like Councilor Massey said, like, you don't want to create an additional problem for one that we don't currently really have. Like, with the tests that we have, E. coli is fine, and I'm just trying to understand how this is going to work, and how often you do it is really what's going to matter on people trusting the safety of the water. I'm not going to trust a report from 3 months ago. So that's where I'm kind of confused on is.
Well, that was one of Peter's points.
No, I know,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
that's
yeah.
what I'm saying for just in general. This is where I'm at right now. Is just, I just don't know how it would work. I mean, sure, if you want to take some information from Portland and from West, and add a page to our website, I'm fine with that. You know, if you want to add a link to Wes's report or a link on there that goes to Portland's report, I just don't know if we have the capacity to do it, and and how often would we need to do it in order to really change the perception. So.
As someone who's relatively new to the Willamette Valley, I will say it's interesting to, like, the Willamette River I've always known and enjoyed swimming in has been relatively clean. But you hear from people who have been here since the 80s and they don't want to touch the Willamette with a 10-foot pole because the Willamette has markedly changed in the last 40 years. I think that that stigma is something that really exists in our community, is something that makes it a challenge to have this amazing natural resource be something that people feel comfortable going to. And I think at the end of the day, that is what we're hearing from community members. They want some type of effort from the city to help break down that stigma. I don't think that I totally take that in a dream world, if we had infinite money, we would test on a daily basis constantly and could report about the conditions on the Willamette River. I also take that we're not going to convince everyone that the Willamette is clean just based on one test. But having some type of baseline to show you that the Willamette River of your childhood is not what you're swimming in now, and that it is relatively safe, if we can show that at some point in time, whether we say that at the start of swimming season, say, to start out this swim season, we did a test. Here's a link to Portland's continuous testing. Here's a link to our West data. The Willamette is a great access. People can feel fine to swim in it, whatever we need to couch that in legal terms to make that work. I think that type of resource for our community is very valuable, and it's valuable to point back to. We're not going to change everyone's perception of this, but I think it is important to have some type of data that we can say the Willamette is safe. It is not a perfect statement, and we will not have the context of every day or every week or every month, but something to show facts and figures about why the Willamette is safe, I think is valuable, and some scaled down version that meets the resources that we have, I think would be an appropriate next step.
Councilor Massey?
So I will say that there's probably one question that we maybe have not asked, and that is why the city of Portland and, samples for E. coli. And evidently nothing else on a continuing basis. I actually know something about toxicology from my previous profession. And, in toxicology and industrial hygiene, you do a lot of surveying. And you see some exposures to chemicals, heavy metals, all that kind of thing. But typically, that requires long-term exposure to have negative health effects. So even if Precision Cast Parts is putting something in Johnson Creek, these studies show that, you got to have a lot of exposure, and I don't think we got any pearl divers, on the bottom of Johnson Creek, spending all their time down there getting exposed to whatever heavy metals may be coming back there. And I probably shouldn't be disparaging Precision Cast Parts. But I go back to the first point is that let's just ask the Portland, why do you sample for E. coli and evidently nothing else? Because you know what? They got a lot of resources. I bet they got an answer.
So you might not have lived here, but there was the big pipe. Does that mean anything to you?
It does.
Okay. I think that's why they sample for E. coli, because there was a history in Portland of sewage overflows, sewer and stormwater coming in the
Combined
same,
sewer
combined sewer overflows. And so that is why, people didn't swim in the river in Portland, and it was about E. coli. I mean, it was about sewage. And so.
And you might be right, but I think that we should ask that question because there may be other reasons as well. Because of this, sustained exposure issues that I just mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
I also will just say, and Peter, correct me if I'm getting this wrong, but
Wes and Portland's BES are wastewater treatment providers. We are not a wastewater treatment provider.
That
So-
is correct. Right.
That's why, one reason they test is they're regulated on it and we aren't.
Yeah, a couple additional, I guess, comments, following up on some of the discussions that we've had. First off, I want to just briefly talk about our drinking water and what we do there, because I think there's a very important difference of what we're talking about. So our drinking water is regulated by the Clean Water Drinking Act, right? So we sample and monitor our drinking water continuously. I should say monitor it continuously to make sure that it's meeting our disinfection requirements, that to ensure that it's not contaminated with bacteria. And we sample frequently throughout the month to test to see what we see out in the distribution system. And then at the end of the year, we report out all of the different samples that we've done in our water quality report. But it's continuously monitored. You know, if we have an upset in our system, our SCADA system sends out an alarm saying, hey, your disinfection's not working, there's a problem. So we know and we keep track of what's going on there to make sure that we're providing clean, safe drinking water. The testing requirements, what we sample for, there's a broad spectrum of inorganic chemicals and organic chemicals that we sample based on schedules that are set out by the EPA as part of the Clean Water Drinking Act. We also sample for coliform, which is an indicator, a bacterial indicator of bacteria in the water. Monthly, we take 32 different samples throughout the distribution system to make sure that that we don't see that in the system. So a completely different process. And what we're talking about in the Willamette, taking a sample, is going out in a moving dynamic body and taking one grab sample at one discrete point and saying this is representative of what the Willamette is in terms of how it's the health of that water body at that point of time. It's just a very discrete point. That's what that sampling would look like. And we would be sampling just for that E. coli parameter. So, which is what Portland Check the Rec does. I do feel that, you know, I would say that we don't have any legal or regulatory obligation to sample for this water. And I still feel like it sets us up. It sets up an expectation of when we publish data that we might have and that we're validating the safety of the water based on a really small sample of what's going on in the river. So those are really some of my big concerns there.
I mean, wouldn't the sampling be, it's interesting how much we've heard about what's going on in Johnson Creek just in the last day. I haven't heard all that before. But wouldn't the sampling there'd be some validation of it because of the sampling that's happening at Waverly? I mean, wouldn't that be somewhat, I don't know, you know, yeah. I mean, if our point in time and capture and their point in time capture are pretty similar, then there's some assurance people have.
It's just indicative of that water at that very discrete point when we've taken that sample. And you know, that water body is very dynamic. There's a lot of movement across the stream. It's across the river, and it's a wide river. So it would just be a very small point in time that in and a water body that changes regularly.
Okay, on a different topic, we had a suggestion from one of the speakers, and I had actually kind of had the same idea, which is having a website that's a compendium of what testing is already done. And just being a page to refer people to where there is data. What do you think of that idea?
I think I'm amenable to that. I think that's a reasonable
Yeah,
way to, it's a way to handle it. We could point people to the data that already exists.
agreed. And I think, you know, I hear and really, really appreciate all the comments about, you know, really the policy goal here. We are not a regulatory body for the Willamette River, and I think we all know that. And so I think really this is about promoting access to our waterfront. And I think that's a really noble goal. I appreciated what Jacob Sherman said about this might not be the only way to do that. I think our permitting of the little float and our support of efforts like that are other ways that we can really get people down there. I think sharing that information is fine. I would hesitate to say anything about, you know, and we've reviewed this and we think it's safe because to Peter's point, we aren't we are not the regulatory body and there is liability risk there. So I'm not saying that because I don't want people to be informed or to be excited about using our waterfront. I think often about what the scope of our role is as the organization, and I don't think our scope is to tell people if it's safe or not to swim in the river.
Okay, Council President?
I want to try and call the question here and see if we can provide clear guidance to staff. I think what I'm hearing is there's a consensus to have staff go back and develop some type of website that provides information on swimming conditions in Milwaukie with the knowledge. Maybe we're not telling people it's safe to swim. I frankly think we should be trying to get there, but trying to dispel this like biases that people might have about our river. The part that I'm not sure if there's consensus on that I want to just float forward. I think it's appropriate to, as we put that together, have staff recommend, is there any one-time test that we might do or something that we do that supplements this data? And staff to provide a recommendation back, knowing that there are going to be caveats that we have to provide to that data. I don't know if there's consensus for that on the dais. I might put that forward. I think there is consensus on the website, but could we check a pulse check with counselors to see if folks are okay with staff in putting together some type of website? Also saying, is there some extra data not found in other sources that we might want to test for to be able to supplement our website?
Okay, let's take the first question. Is everyone supportive of staff trying to pull together a website? Yes. Getting nods all along. Okay.
That would be a web page on our current site.
Yeah.
And we would link to existing data.
To Portland and West.
Without suggesting that this data says the water is safe, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think
we'll work on it.
You've got a lawyer. He'll help you with wording. Okay, so second question is, should staff feel free to come back as they work on that and give us other ideas about things we might do a one-time test for? I mean, Peter seems pretty convinced a one-time test is of little value.
Let me put this back. I would like to, I think the direction that if I were giving direction on my own would be, our residents have clear biases against the Willamette River and swimming in the Willamette River. I don't think that those biases are reflective of the data that we have currently in the Willamette River. And if that's not the case, to dispel those notions about the Willamette, staff should put together a website saying it's relatively safe or safer than you might think, including links to data. If there are any gaps that prevent us from saying something like that, or something else that might be valuable to tell our residents outside of just E. coli or the West treatment data, is there some other tests that we could do to provide some type of baseline for our residents to know that? I've heard people talk about brain-eating bacteria, or like, is there just something else that we could provide? I know that it will not be like guarantee. I know that there might be liability concerns, but like, is there not something else that we could do to test for something else here that staff could bring back? And I guess that's my ask. When you put together this website, is there some gap that we might be able to communicate to our residents by doing some type of test?
Well, I don't think you need consensus of council on that. I mean, I think staff would do that if they,
I think the answer is no. I think right now there's not something, and I don't know what additional work we can do to go above what this staff recommendation is, which is, so, yeah, I mean, I think if you all had other things, or if when the mayor asked, you know, the commenters, if there's other things, you can provide direction to us on that, but I don't think staff going back and thinking about it more is gonna come back with an additional answer.
And I think, I would say the standard that, and I think I've outlined it in the report on page 2. So there's a discussion there that, you know, with Wes's DEQ, NPDS permit, you know, it established their effluent limits that are identical to the state's water quality criteria for primary recreation contact, which is at 126 organisms per 100 milliliters of water. So that's the criteria that the state uses to say that the water is okay for primary recreation contact. They don't have an expansive list of all the waterborne diseases that might exist out there.
oh, okay. Counselor Massey.
Yeah, this is I think it's a fishing expedition, like, tell us what else we can sample for. Well, it's a pretty darn long list,
Yeah.
okay? And so before we go off and say, come up with a list, which I, quite frankly, I respect you, I'm not sure you have the expertise to develop that list, okay? And I can go back to, let's ask some questions of people who have some resources and expertise in this and find out what's out there, because I'd be surprised if we don't find some of these things and understand the rationale for either discounting it because of exposure levels or discounting it because of exposure times. And I'd be surprised if you don't find some things like that, rather than going off on this Easter egg hunt of coming up with a long list of things to, have some lab, test for, because that lab will be glad to do it for you at a cost. So let's do the easy stuff first.
Okay. Oh, Counselor Kosrapati?
Yeah, I would just say to add to the webpage, and with it on top of the links, I mean, maybe we can add what has been done over the last 20, 40 years to the Willamette to clean it up, to make it better, to make, you know what I mean? Like, talk more about some of the mitigation efforts that were put forward after some of these disasters that happened. These, I think that helps too, because I don't know what's been done to that river to clean it up since all that, since the big pipe and all that. I don't think a lot of us do. And I think maybe having a little bit more of a timeline of history of, like, okay, this is what happened to the Willamette. These are the mitigation things that have been done. Just gives more people more peace of mind when they do go in there, knowing that, okay, stuff has been taken care of. But, I'm with Counselor Massey. I just don't know what we want you guys to come back with. So, I mean, I'm all for the webpage, but, I don't think we should be fishing for a reason to swim or not to swim in the Willamette.
Okay. So is that the consensus? Anybody in disagreement that we aren't asking staff to do any additional testing or come up with a list of chemicals or anything like that? A list of substances? Okay. All right. And I will say, I mean, on this point, I mean, if you start doing a history of the Willamette, everyone's eyes will glaze over, but, yeah.
Mitigation efforts to clean it up.
Yeah, I would maybe do something on Kellogg itself, because Kellogg had a lot of overflows back in the day and doesn't anymore. And it's, I mean, part of that is because they divert more, right? They build new diverter lines and they divert more to Tri-City. But yeah, I mean, I think telling the story of why Milwaukie Bay is, you know, should not scare people, is something we should try to do.
And Mayor, and I think that's great, and I think we will get to work on this website. I also I don't want to glaze over that second bullet up there, that we're not trying to minimize the interests or the questions that our constituents are asking. And I think the city does play a role in promoting use of our waterfront, but we're not the only ones who do. You have a Parks and Rec district, you have a Water Environmental Services district, you have watershed councils. There are other agencies, frankly, that are already set up to do more of this work than we are. And so I just don't want to lose that piece there too. And
Well, except that the resident who started all this started with Wes.
Sure. No,
and
totally.
got referred to us by Wes. So
Totally understand, yeah. And
Yeah.
I can't ever promise that agencies will be receptive, but I just think I really appreciate the energy and the passion our advocates have. And I want them to know that, again, the city, you know, we will do what we can within the roles and the authority that we have. And I encourage them to also ask the same questions of other agencies that represent them and have more direct regulatory control on this.
Okay. I think we're done with this one. All right. Thank you. All right. And now we have council reports. And this is the council president has some folks from the Elks who have been very patiently here all night. So he sent us a letter about, a draft letter about supporting an ask by the Elks and I guess the CERT team or something. So go ahead.
Not at the request of the CERT team, just the Elks. Let me pull this up here. Maybe if someone else wants to do the report.
Could
let me
you
get my
pull
stuff
the
up.
letter up on the screen, Mr. Stoffer? Because I don't want to pull my computer out.
Counselor Anderson, I read the letter and I'm not sure what the ask is.
Yep.
And so I kind of know the topic area, but I don't really know what the ask is. I mean, what are we supporting?
I've got my email here. So we can also have folks at the Elks Lodge speak to it. I'll give a quick summary and then they can supplement however else they want to add it. The Elks Lodge is doing an annex to be able to have different emergency response place at their facility to be able to respond to a disaster if it happens. This is a part of FEMA's program, the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, that after a disaster, they offer these grants up for local areas to implement projects to be able to respond to a future natural disaster. And so the Elks is stepping up to provide that space for our community. The Elks have been advised by someone at the Oregon Department of Emergency Management that in order to be competitive for a federal grant, it's helpful to have letters from community members saying that this is going to be a valuable community resource and tying it to existing emergency management work, which is why I mentioned CERT and some of the other programs that Milwaukie does. Elks Lodge is outside of Milwaukee city boundaries, but it is a really important spot where we've got a lot of members who are residents of the city. It's a space that, while outside of our city limits, is so close that most people would think it's actually Milwaukie. And in the case of a natural disaster, it would be a real asset for our community to have a space there. So this is a letter that discusses why we support this project and why it would be a value add to our community. Chief Burdick has already sent in a letter. We would be adding to that chorus of support saying that a project like this would be well suited for our community. But if you want to come talk about specifics of the project, maybe that's helpful.
If you could state your names and city of residence for the record before you speak, that'd be helpful.
Dave Hollingsworth, Gladstone.
Jason Allen, unincorporated Clackamas County is where I live.
Just to kind of add a little bit to what Mr. Anderson said, and thank you for giving us the time. We don't care about the length of time we had to wait. It was fine. It was reminding us of our own process internally. So to get,
Fondly.
as chairman of the board for the Elks, I'm responsible for managing this. I get it. So, the project, this all came about when we were approached by CERT and by, 2D Smith, to saying that there was this grant opportunity available. And if we had anything that we could do to, help with what the state was trying to do with this grant. So what we did was we looked back on what we've done for the community in the past. The Molalla fires, I was not a part of the Elks at that time, Jason was. But we were a staging place for all of those families to be able to come, just have a place to bed down for the night, get a hot meal, shower, whatever they needed. And as Elks, we want to be a part of the community for all of that. We have a building called the Annex. It's not something that we would build, but it used to be our old main lodge in the 50s and 60s when our current building was being built. That is where we had our regular meetings. It's now just basically a storage facility for the lodge, and it's pretty much an unused building, but it's a large building. It's a couple thousand square feet of space. And so I had the idea of using this as the grant. What we've asked for is roughly $260,000 for solar panels to make the building completely independent off of the grid in case of a natural disaster, and $270,000 to $280,000 of upgrades to make it so that all of the current things that are breaking down, water, electricity, ramping up for what, and just getting it to the point it could take all that solar, do and be able to house, we figure 70 to 80 people inside the building, which is in addition to all of the people that we could place on our 5.4 acres of land there. Be able to feed them, be able to give them showers, just a place to congregate, and for FEMA and the local emergency management systems to utilize to have as a headquarters in case other facilities weren't available. We know that there's other places that the local authorities can go, but we would just be another resource. So that's all we've done is we've applied for that. Now with this grant, one of the things that we had to do is the emergency mitigation. FEMA wants it to be that we earthquake proof or otherwise mitigate a natural disaster for the property itself. And so they've added some things.
They're not subject to that. They're part of your.
So they've added some pieces to the grant, and they keep pushing this back. This is a grant that we originally wrote in December of last year, was supposed to fund in April, and due to a variety of reasons, it keeps getting pushed back. But the state is asking us to continue to do things like what we're asking you guys to do, is get letters of support, keep providing more information on how we would utilize this property after if we got this grant approved. So I hope that.
So you said FEMA wanted you to do seismic improvements.
What's that?
You said FEMA wanted you to do seismic improvements also, but
Yeah,
you're
they've
not
asked.
including that?
They have asked that be actually the focus of the grant, and then the ability to use it as emergency management staging and basically housing be a secondary role for it. And so we've had to add in some seismic upgrades as part of our improvements to the building itself to make
So
sure that.
you've gotten all that, like
We've
scoped and bid
yeah,
and-
we've gone through the process of doing everything that they've asked at every hurdle, but it seems like about every 6 weeks we get asked to do something else to satisfy FEMA, and then now FEMA is basically closed. So we can't even contact our local FEMA people that we worked with years ago for letters of support and say, hey, yeah, these guys stepped up and helped. So it's kind of frustrating in that sense, but we're reaching out to the community to see what support we can gather.
And so the seismic probably dramatically increased your total ask of them.
We couldn't increase the ask. We had to reallocate some of the improvements that we were going to make to the building itself. So we still have the solar that's going to go on, but some of the infrastructure, we're going to have to figure out internally how we're going to fund that. And we have fundraising goals and I'll say we have a lot of tradesmen who are willing to put their time and effort into that building that before we would have probably paid for their time, but they're stepping up and saying, you know what, we can probably do this in place of, we don't think the seismic upgrades are going to be hugely costly. It's not going to overpower the entire grant, but it's gonna definitely add an element that we have to mitigate, so.
Anybody else have questions?
Yeah. So, who operates the facility in case of an emergency?
We would.
Yeah, so I could actually speak to that.
Please.
So in the case of an emergency, technically the officers of our lodge, our board are ultimately in charge. So me and our three other vice presidents, I'm currently the president of the lodge, and we have 5 trustees. They're the 9 board members that are ultimately in charge of everything that we do. But we also have a committee that we put together called ERS, which is the Elks Emergency Response Team, which they were formed during the Milwaukie fires. And basically, the Milwaukie fires are what actually got me involved, other than just the guy that showed up down there and drank a few beers every once in a while. The Milwaukie fires were amazing in the response that we did. In fact, it was so quick and so swift that we beat FEMA to it. And they just said, well, what's the point? They're already on top of it, and just started, like, without us asking, just started cutting us checks because of what we had accomplished. So we're a lodge that is actually the fastest growing lodge in the country. We have grown over double in less than 3.5 years. I affectionately refer to it as the living room of Milwaukie, is what it has turned into. And because of that, we have a vast amount of volunteers and people that are actively working on always that response when something is to happen.
That's great to hear. One more question? What is the CERT connection?
They're they're a partner in this. They were one of the first people that we reached out to, or at least our ERS committee reached out to see what we could do to mitigate stuff in this community. And one of the things that they did ask that we've already actually done was we hold water filters in case of a water emergency. We have 2 pumps that could make clean drinking water for the community. And that's part of what they asked us to do outside of this grant. So we've already started working with them on trying to make sure we can respond however we need to.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
And I should know that.
I think you know what I'm gonna say, Council
Yeah, I'll
President.
move to continue the meeting until 10:10.
Is there a second?
Ooh, I'll second it because I have a question.
It's been moved and seconded to continue the meeting till 10:10. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None heard. Meeting's continued. Please proceed. Were you finished with your, oh,
How competitive is this grant?
There was $16.8 million. We understand that there were 30 original applicants, and they narrowed it down to 10.
Okay.
I believe they're trying to be equitable in their distribution of funds, and so they're just trying to, at this point, dot their I's and cross their T's so that they know that the people they're gonna give the money to are gonna use it responsibly. I can't say more than that, because I don't know if there's a group asking for 5 million of the 16, or if they're all kind of, so we specifically didn't ask for millions of dollars because we didn't want to be greedy. I mean, we could have asked for, the whole grant if we wanted to, but we didn't know. But we know that some of the other projects were less likely to be funded. And again, Oregon Emergency Management, Shannon Breyer at that level has been working with us and is kind of leading us along the path of trying to get us approved. So I think the state level really wants this to happen.
so you're saying 30, you made the cut, 10 out of 30,
Yeah, we made the first round.
and that's a national thing,
No,
or that's an
no,
Oregon
State of
thing?
Oregon.
Okay.
This is all through the state of Oregon.
Okay.
The
Other
mayor
questions?
stole my follow-up
Oh.
question. All right, I'm done. Thank you.
Anybody else?
I just want to say thank you all for your work on this. This is going to be such a great resource to have in our community. And I'm so happy that we have the easiest job, just chiming in and saying this would be great. So,
And I
thank you.
did forward you copies of the grant application that we submitted, so you
Awesome.
have a copy of that actual application.
We've got lots of questions.
It's
so I can
about
send it over
60
to folks.
pages of government speak. Yeah.
So I guess I'm not, yeah. I'm not inclined to wordsmith the letter, but my one point was, I feel like we should say that it's not in Milwaukie. That we support it
Oh, fair
and that it
enough.
serves our community, but it's not in the city of Milwaukie.
Yeah, look, I think any letter helps our cause.
Yeah.
And that's all we're looking for is the OEM just said you get as many letters of support as you can. And you guys being our really closest municipality besides, I don't even, Oak Grove and all that. We just reached out and said, yeah, we would love the support if we can get it.
Mayor, is there a part of the letter that you feel, like gives the illusion that it's?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think the whole tone of the letter implies that it's in Milwaukie. So, I mean, I think it could be as simple as somewhere saying, the Elks, located just south of Milwaukie or something like that. I mean, I don't think we have to make a big deal out of it. But I feel like, yeah, the whole letter sort of implies that it's in Milwaukie.
I'm fine not to include that. Like, I don't think that that level of detail is necessary. And if that complicates the folks reading it or gives them a reason not to fund the project, I don't know. I'm just fine not to include it. I don't think we're being false in this statement.
And I don't believe that what the ultimate goal of this grant they would limit the help that we would give to just Milwaukie. We're going to give it to anyone in our region who is looking for support. So from the Elks perspective, we're here to help everyone, to include Milwaukie. So.
Yeah, I don't feel a need to include that parameter.
Okay. Okay. So everybody good with signing on to this letter?
I would like to say that, unlike the council president, I'm willing to sign his letter without any audits. Something that he is not willing to do on any other letter.
Without any.
Hey, I did your parks letter. No, I gave you carte blanche to write that parks letter.
Okay. So do we need a motion or we just kind of head nods that we're all okay with signing the letter? Okay.
I'm glad you stayed all night for this thing.
Thank you. Yep. All right.
Come back anytime.
Any other council reports?
Yes.
Okay.
One quick. Had a CAB meeting. Just want to give you guys an update on where we're at. We're currently in the process of putting together our needs assessment for the next year. The county needs assessment. We're working on the format, trying to simplify it. We're talking about, the outreach part of it. We're doing a lot of the legwork to get that needs assessment put together. We are also, I just want to get this out to everyone who's listening or may watch this later. Obviously, we've heard about the SNAP benefits being partially restored. Well, Clackamas County has a website that has a list of food resources. So I just want to make sure that people have this website. It is clackamas.us. What is that, // I don't know, they do /food-resources. And that'll take you to a page that has a list of food resources in every city in the county, regional resources. So please, anybody who does need that, and even if you don't need that, please share this with as many people as you can and get it out there. And I would ask our council members that we send this out on our social media, and if the city could post that website on their social media page, I would greatly appreciate that.
We
as well.
absolutely can, and we are producing our own resource as well. Our
Excellent.
library took that on, but we will do both.
Excellent. And then the last point is we are also in the process of creating 2 subcommittees within the CAB. One of them is the Community Outreach / Community Needs Subcommittee. The other one will be the Legislative Subcommittee to help advocate at the state level for community needs. So that's all I got for you.
All right. Thank you. Any other?
Water Consortium.
Okay.
It was a fairly short meeting, but Rebecca Geisen, who's been working on the Water Consortium for 27 years, is retiring. So they had a big send-off for her. They lost their Spanish media partner. which resulted in a carryover of $183,000. And so they're looking at ways to spend that because they can't spend it on the Spanish outreach that they planned for the year. And so last time they did an equipment drill was like 3 years ago. So they think that they're going to do that again next year, which was not originally planned for. And they're also going to do a one-time purchase of emergency drinking water bags. I brought up the topic of the legislative proposal for the water systems operator training, and they said, yeah, they sent a letter of support, but they were not really at all upset about it, which kind of surprised me.
None of the cities were?
No one was, but
Really?
they wanted to talk about fourth grade water conservation training a lot, not about operator training. So at any rate, that's the water consortium.
Interesting, okay.
Just a couple quick, it's the week of open houses and ribbon cuttings. Tomorrow morning is Short Stack, open house 8 to 10, and Hillside's on Thursday, 3 to 5. Is anyone going to Short Stack at 8 tomorrow?
It says 8 to
8 a.m. to 10 a.m.
10.
Can I send you with some flyers to,
You going on the
Yeah.
early side?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
okay, then I'll print them right after this and have you bring them. They're from the Harvey Street project, and I just, knowing what daycare drop-off will be like tomorrow, probably can't make it there right by 8.
And there's also ribbon cutting at Bonaventure on Saturday. So yes, it is quite the week of ribbon cutting events. Yeah, those scissors that were used yesterday needed a sharpening, didn't they? Yeah. Okay, we're at we have 3 minutes. Anything else?
Another haiku.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
You have to move in haiku.
It's time to go home. I would like to sleep very soon.
Bye.
I move to adjourn.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Somebody over here can second. You don't have to wait a second. It's been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, you can stay. We are adjourned.